Gentlemen, go ahead and swallow the bell. Let's get this going.
All right, I am certainly grateful for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. Grateful for the invitation from David. We've talked before quite a bit on the radio program that I do, and I felt like we had a really good exchange and appreciated the attitude that David brought to it, so I was inclined to say yes when he invited me to participate this evening. I'll set one just sort of ground rule. It's not a rule for you, but something to understand about what I'm doing tonight, what my purpose is tonight, what I represent tonight. I am not here to speak on behalf of all of the idiotic, hypocritical, and shallow-faced nominal Christianity that's claimed around the world, nor of other beliefs in God. I don't care about that. That's not what I represent. So I am as disdainful of a shallow and hypocritical belief in God as I am of disbelief in God. That's all in the same category for me. None of it is legitimate faith in God. What I am representing is a window of faith. I can't represent anything else because that's the only thing I believe in, the stuff that I actually believe in. So, as I'm speaking tonight, I will be speaking to theism, I will be speaking to supernaturalism, I will be speaking to what I believe is legitimate Christianity. And by legitimate Christianity, I just mean the simple thing that I understand of what happened in my life also, which is that I knew early on that I was all screwed up. I knew most everybody was pretty well screwed up. And it wasn't hard for me to realize that something needed to happen for it to be made right. And I didn't just gung-ho go for it and try to keep all the rules and get better. But instead, I had faith in what I had been told from the time I was a little boy. I put my faith in Jesus Christ, who I believed died for me, and I believe that now, and who I believed rose from the dead, and I believe that now. And because of that faith, my life was changed. And I am still, in some ways, all screwed up. But in other ways, I've been completely changed by it, in ways that I would not plan for myself and did not plan for myself. So when I'm asked the question, does the God of the Bible exist, which is the question for this first half of the debate, there are three different parts to that question that I have to address. The first, just being the concept of existence, because the question is weighted by your interpretation of the word existence. If you already presume that only those things that exist in space and time, extended things, if you believe only those things can exist, then obviously it's not going to make sense to you if I say a non-material being, which in itself would be self-contradictory to you, exists. But I am going to say that. So the first question we're going to have to address is just what would be meant by existence. What could be real? Is it possible that non-material things are real, which I think everybody has to agree with, but some don't. And then beyond that, is it possible that one of those non-material things is something we would refer to as God? Because that's the next part of the question. Does the God of the Bible exist? Now, one of the elements of the Bible is that it's divided in half. I don't presume that you believe the Bible. Some of you do, some of you don't. Right? You don't need to agree with me that the Bible is true in order for my statements about the Bible to make sense to you. I'm explaining why I believe the things I do, and then trying to give justification for why that position is not completely irrational, why it might make sense. I guess in that light, I should probably give one more caveat before I jump into it here. And that is that if I were to ask you the question, is it possible? And you see, one of the reasons I enjoy interacting with David is because I know he believes this is possible. It is possible that we disagree completely. That I believe in God, that he does not believe in God, that I believe God is essential to morality, and he does not believe God is essential to morality, and all that kind of stuff. That we can disagree about those things and still think that each other might not be complete idiots. That there's some reason to believe there's some intelligence in either of us or both of us. If you don't believe that's possible, if you don't even believe it's possible that I could disagree with you about there being a God, about there being non-material reality, about Jesus Christ being the Savior who rose from the dead, if you just think it's automatically a sign of imbecility for a person to believe those things, then I'm not sure what you think is tolerant or rational or intelligent about your position. I'm not sure I understand where you're coming from. Because the whole point of having rational discussion is to recognize that sometimes we can be wrong. And if that's possible, then I need to hear the other side and realize that intelligent people have held both of these positions over time. So is it possible for somebody to hold an intelligent view that you disagree with? Maybe. We'll see as we're going through it tonight. Can't speak for other intelligent people who might hold it, and I can't speak for whether I'm intelligent or not. I'm the only guide I've got for whether I am or not. I mean, it seems smart to me, but that doesn't help me in comparison to everyone else. So, in light of that, what I'm trying to say to you is to address that question. Does the God of the Bible exist? I have to talk about existence. I have to talk about God in general, which is theism, because if we don't talk about theism in general, it's not going to make any sense for me to talk about the God of the Bible existing. And then I have to talk about the thing that makes the God of the Bible distinctive in some way. Well, in all three of those categories, what we're going to be talking about is on existence, whether supernaturalism is possible or not. Is there anything beyond the created order? If there's nothing beyond the created order, then talk about God is just nonsensical. If there is, then talk about God is reasonable. I mean, at least we have grounds for the discussion. Secondly, is it even possible that God exists in some way, or is it necessary to believe for some reason that God exists at all? As I was saying, the Bible is divided into these two parts, Old and New Testament, basically the Jewish canon and then the Christian canon added to that. And by canon, I just mean the Old and New Testament, the books authorized, that we view as Scripture. And so when you divide that in half, the Old Testament basically gives us God as the Creator. He is the Creator God. So, when you ask me, does the God of the Bible exist? One of the answers to that question is, can I give a case that says that the Creator of the universe, that there is some being who exists who is that, the Creator of the universe? So just creation itself, which is why that's one of the topics that comes up later. And then beyond that, I go to the New Testament and I say, okay, so what does this part of the Bible tell me about God that I should do in answer to the question, does the God of the Bible exist? And that would be about Jesus Christ. Because it's not just, we could argue about Trinitarianism and all of that stuff, but it's still going to come down to Jesus Christ, which is why I was telling you that what I'm defending in faith today is my faith in Jesus Christ, both as Lord and Savior. That's my whole point for being here. But with that said, there are certain things about this discussion that don't begin with Jesus being Lord and Savior. There are parts of this discussion that everybody anywhere in the world could know, whether they wake up in, whether they're born in a Western culture with Christian roots, or if they're born in an Eastern society with Buddhistic or Hindu roots. It doesn't make any difference. That there are certain things I think are just built into us that we can't get around. I know most people don't like that anymore. They don't like that language anymore, but I think there are certain things about rationality that are universal. We just can't get around it. And if you disagree with me, you agreed with me, because to disagree with me is to say that you think something that's not true is false. And that's to agree that rationality is a basic root for our conversations. So the three areas that I was talking about come to me this way. Now I have a background epistemologically where I would want to tell you how I came to these views. But then I also have a more important metaphysical point to make about it as well. When you answer, why are you a Christian, for instance? Why do you believe the things you do? There are always two different answers to that question. A psychological and historical answer to the question, well, my parents told me about Christ when I was young, and I came to know this and that, like I was telling you a minute ago. Then there's also this answer that has more to do with purpose. Because I want this or that, or because I understand this or that to be true now, and so I choose to hold this view or whatever. So in terms of background and purpose, I'm answering those three questions. I don't know how much time I have left, because I don't know if we're going by the set clock or if you started a timer when I began. So I've got like 3 minutes?
About 2.
Okay. So there are three different ways to know things. David Hume gave us two. Relations of ideas and matters of fact. Relations of ideas, all the things that are purely rational, on a purely rational basis. I believe God exists, and in fact, I cannot make sense of the idea that God would not exist any more than I can make sense of the idea that circles could be square. If it is possible that God exists, then I cannot conceive of a possible universe in which God does not exist. And For those of you who know the language of it, I'm basing it on the modal form of the ontological argument. That's my belief. Now, I didn't say that's a proof. I said my argument for it is that if it is possible for a maximally excellent and great being to exist, then I cannot conceive of any possible way that that being would not exist in every possible universe, which means I can't conceive of how there would not be a God. So rationally, I'm drawn to that. Then I've got this other side of me that's experiential, inductive, and empirical, the science side that David likes so much. And the science side of things says to me, everything else I experience in the world, everything materially, has something that caused it. Everything. Simple cosmological argument. Actually, it's the Collin form of the cosmological argument. And so I look at the universe and I say that's a thing that appears to exist to me. It appears to. And if that's the case, then I figure there's something that's not like the universe that must have caused it. If it was something like the universe, I'd just be stuck with the same question again, and I wouldn't have solved the problem. So there must be something not like the universe that caused the universe. I don't know what it is, but whatever it is, I call it God. That's what Thomas Aquinas said also. That's what I'm talking about there. And when it comes to Christianity, I have this third source of knowledge that most people discard and ignore, but it's always there. Basically authority, revelation, whatever you want to call it. Historically it was revelation. And I believe the testimony of the people who from the first year till now have said that Jesus rose from the dead. That's the testimony of the men I've chosen to believe. So, does the God of the Bible exist? Yeah, I think so.
First, I'd like to thank secular students at Collin College and their president, Patrick Smith, for making this happen, and to Kevin Butler, of course, for making those connections and for moderating this evening. I must also thank Dr. Barry Creamer. Thank you so much for being here, and thank all of you for being here tonight as well. Tonight, I'm not going to follow the standard debate path or bore you with the same discussions you've already watched for years on YouTube. My approach tonight is simply one of common sense. For example, if I told you I came here tonight in a white car, you'd have no reason to challenge me. You wouldn't care. I could just say, trust me, and you probably would. But if I said something a little more important, something pertaining to a medical condition you may have, or something that's an immediate threat to someone, I should be held accountable for those words. It's a pretty serious accusation. Well, tonight, Dr. Creamer has already made a pretty strong claim. I think that this is his stance in general. He says that a very powerful being exists. That being is watching you, judging you, intervening in your life, whether you want it to or not, demands for you to believe it is a good being, despite children and other innocent people continuing to suffer on a daily basis. And that being will ultimately torture you for eternity in a lake of fire if you do not comply with certain rules that Dr. Creamer and his friends will gladly interpret for you. Regardless of whatever evidence he presents tonight, in the end, as he has already said, it starts with faith. It's a far greater claim than mine of arriving in a white car, yet he wants you to trust it and believe it just the same. This to me means it's not really about evidence so much as it is about belief. So what makes somebody believe in something? What really makes you believe? In all seriousness, I'm not joking here, in all seriousness, by show of hands, who here tonight believes in Bigfoot? I really expected at least a couple of hands to go up. Nobody? It's perfectly fine. Are you just afraid to admit it? You know, you watch the shows. People are alive today that claim to have witnessed Bigfoot and even captured it on video. Yet you don't believe it. My friend and one of the 3 listeners of my podcast, Matt Dillon, he often uses the analogy of alien abductions. He points out very few people actually believe this happens, yet there are thousands that claim to have experienced it directly. So what would it take for you to believe? As an example, ask yourself if you would believe the following animal exists if I shared with you these 3 facts. In April 1982, the Vermont House of Representatives passed House Resolution 19, which protects this animal from any willful act resulting in death, injury, or harassment. In 1983, New York legislators followed suit with the exact same law protecting this animal from death or harassment. There are entire newspapers, magazines, t-shirt sales, figurines, an entire economy essentially built on the preservation of this animal. With that information alone, which by the way is all true, it sounds like a reasonable proposition that this animal exists. It's pretty clear. But here's what I haven't told you. Those facts, which are true, are about a lake monster in Vermont. His name is Champ. He's said to be a snake-like creature about 187 feet long, with elephant ears, jaws like an alligator, a mane like a horse, and moose antlers. Moose antlers. Despite all the evidence, strong economic growth on the basis of this animal, and even government acceptance of this myth, it's still unbelievable. That is where the God of the Bible comes in. Although it's widely accepted and even government approved, we have more evidence for lake monsters, aliens, and Bigfoot than we do for any deity. My opponent is a reasonable and intelligent person. That is one thing we agree on. If you told him you witnessed someone rise from the dead and you pointed to that person, he wouldn't believe you. He wouldn't believe that person could turn water into wine or walk on water no matter how many times you told him. But why? Because those concepts are so far-fetched and defy every form of logic he uses in real life. But if you write it down in a language he can't read and then bury it for 2,000 years, do you think it would suddenly be more believable? I don't understand this reasoning. It's still hearsay. It's just really, really old hearsay, which somehow lends more merit to it. It doesn't make sense to me. And honestly, the reason I do what I do is because I'm so intrigued by the believer. I'm not angry with them or want to have confrontations. I'm very intrigued by the believer, knowing that most of the time they are very logical people. And then I like to ask them questions and hear them detail step by step the spiritual afterlife. And then they fill in the gaps with their imagination. It's truly amazing to me. He's logical. He follows traffic laws. He doesn't pray his way through 635. He knows that would be dangerous, and he is an intelligent, logical person. Yet, he argues that an invisible being impregnated a woman with himself so that he could be born, teach lessons, and then die as a blood sacrifice back to himself so that humans wouldn't have to pay for their negative behavior if they only believed all of this to be true. It's astonishing to me that in 2012, we are still having these conversations. Look, I don't know everything, and I've never claimed to have all knowledge of the universe. But the specific God of the Bible is not just an improbability. Its existence is an impossibility. Psalm 121:7 says, "The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life." Tell that to any woman who's been raped and prayed for help. Tell that to the 800,000 children that go missing every year. Tell that to the victims of earthquakes, fires, floods, tornadoes, and hurricanes. I don't need to list more than 100 Bible contradictions or discredit biblical scholars or create straw man arguments or somehow back my opponent into a philosophical corner that makes him appear to be incorrect or confused. The bottom line is very simple. If the Bible is the word of the Christian God, and that Bible says that that God will keep us from harm, yet harm continues to happen, that God cannot exist. This doesn't just apply to the problem of evil. It applies to the believer's problem of dealing with logic and then deciding when to throw it out the window. If the Bible is the word of the Christian God, and the Bible flies in the face of very basic scientific facts, like the age of the earth, or species being linked through evolution, or that bats aren't really birds, that God cannot exist. I don't know everything for sure that we're going to hear tonight. But I hope it's more than this particular atheist doesn't know much about certain philosophers or thermodynamics, because I don't. Or that you should have faith and that a lot of other people have bought into this myth, or that a government was built on it. Because in the end, it might be hard to tell the difference between an argument for the God of the Bible versus an argument for the lake monster in Vermont. Thank you.
Yeah, now we're going to have a 3-minute rebuttal. Barry Creamer will respond in a negative from the chair.
The chair.
Yes.
You know the Latin for that, don't you? I speak now ex cathedra. Yeah. Common sense. Okay, so there are so many things to say here, there's no time to say them. So hopefully someone will ask me some questions about bats and birds and things like that during the open time. But let me just hit the main things here. Common sense. First of all, common sense is defined only by the consensus of the population. So common sense and atheism don't go in the same sentence. But that's okay. If I were an atheist and I wanted to appeal to common sense, I'd be content with that. Because if I read Immanuel Kant, which I don't care whether you've read or not, it's okay, I don't mind. If I read Immanuel Kant, I would know that common sense is just an excuse for not examining something and thinking more deeply about it. I do not appeal to common sense to base my philosophy. That's just the truth. I don't. That's why I do philosophy. So that's just not appealing to me at all. If you're going to create an analogy with white cars and snakes and lakes in Vermont and then call me the person who creates straw men, I'm going to be confused throughout the debate. So I find that just frustrating or confusing. If, though, we want to talk about the evil, suffering of children and hell, which are inherently tied together, by the way, and a promise from God that He would keep us from harm somehow, which I'm not sure where exactly that promise is or what you were intending by that. It's interesting to me that all of the descriptions of evil and suffering that come in these types of arguments are external to the speaker. They're external to whoever's making the objection. Evil is what happens with a hurricane or an earthquake or a disease or a Holocaust, but it's not what I did today, not my failure morally. And the reality is that we are responsible morally, and that what I find curious is that we would look at a world that's always been this way. It's always been broken this way. Never been a world where little children didn't die. Never been a world without disease that we know of. Never been a world without wars and earthquakes and suffering. Never. And yet we expect it to be different. We know it ought to be different. It's surprising to me that we would look at the world that we know ought to be better and think that it would end this way, and there is nothing. There is nothing to make all of that right. To look at someone who has faith that there is something in eternity that might make sense of all of this, and then explain, by that sense, why I have this thing built into me that says, even though the world's always been this way, I know it shouldn't be. There is something wrong here. Where did I get that gap? If there really isn't a way the world is supposed to be, that we really aren't measuring up to right now. And it doesn't start in a tornado in the Northeast. It starts with my failure, moral failure. I mean, my time's up, so I'm stopping.
3 minutes ex-cathedral, right?
I love that ending. My time's up, so I'm stopping. That should be how we end every show. And I probably will tomorrow. In your opening statement, Dr. Creamer, you said you couldn't conceive...
Sorry.
Everybody silence your
I've
devices.
already surrendered.
Everybody silence your devices except the moderator. You said in your opening statement that you couldn't conceive a world where God didn't exist.
Right.
And I keep going back to this, but I couldn't conceive a world where even a person had the power to stop something horrible from happening and allows it to happen and watches it happen and does nothing. Just on the problem of evil alone, just that. I can't conceive a world where even a human would stand there and watch that. But honestly, I don't understand how people rape or molest children. That's bothersome to me. But I understand that they're flawed humans that It's a product of evolution, that they're not perfect, that there are issues, there are mental disorders, there are all sorts of personality problems and psychological and psychiatric issues that cause that. But an all-powerful God has no excuses. And pick any case you want, like I brought up before, J.C. Dugard, who was kidnapped and raped for 18 years and kept in a tent in a backyard. Every person I know, atheist, Christian, Muslim, would have stopped that if they had the ability to. And yet we're told that this God is everywhere all the time. So he knows it was happening. He was there. He was watching. Was powerful enough to do something about it. And chose not to. And that's not to say, well, okay, the world has fallen and people sin. I'm not talking about people being fallen or people being what you would call sinners. I'm talking about the God not doing something about it. That's the world I can't conceive. I don't understand the power. We even have laws in place where if a police officer sees something happening, whether he's on duty or not, he's required by law to intervene. Yet we don't hold your God to the same standard. I don't understand that concept, and that's a world that I couldn't conceive. And my time is up, and so I'm done. If we had a moderator, we could probably... Oh, hey there.
All right, for this part of the debate, we're going to go to an open, guided discussion. First, I'm going to ask Dr. Creamer a question, which, after he gives his response, David will be free to respond to, and we'll talk about that topic for 10 minutes, and then we'll move on to another topic as the conversation dictates. So, Dr. Creamer, your first question is, why should the Bible be trusted?
Yeah, I'm inclined, if you don't mind, to also to reply to the rebuttal. I mean, the rebuttal's that way anyway.
Sure.
Sure. I'm not trying to be unfair about it, and then I'll deal with this also in the same time period where we're discussing this. But the argument that God doesn't exist because evil exists is a question-begging argument for a very simple reason. Because of the answer that we give to it. I mean, all believers I know of who reason through this give the same answer to why evil exists in a world where God exists. And that is, he'll make things right in eternity. The response to that from Mr. Smalley, just as he gave a moment ago, is, well, that's silly. He could stop it from happening now. There's no reason to believe that. That argument this is that argument. Because there is no eternity, and because there is no God, the fact that evil exists is evidence that God cannot exist. Why don't you believe that those two things could coexist? Evil in the material and temporal world, and an all-powerful God who makes things right in eternity. Why can't you believe in that? Because I don't believe in eternity. Why don't you believe in eternity? Because I don't believe in non-material and spiritual things. That's not part of my reality. So because I don't believe in God, and then you take 2 steps in between, I come to the conclusion that I don't believe in God. That's not where I start. I do believe in God, and I believe in eternity because I believe in God. It just makes sense to me that he'll do these things in eternity. And so when I look at evil, I presume that God sets things right in eternity, and therefore my faith in God is not shaken. I don't start by saying I believe in God, and therefore I believe in God. I start by saying, I believe in God. This is my if there's a God. Then it makes sense that there would be an eternity, and then all of a sudden, evil in the material world is not the self-defining end of all purpose of existence. So that's why I answer that the way I do. If you want to reply to that before we...
Just really quick, because it's on the topic, should the Bible be trusted?
Yeah.
It's really not because bad things happen, I don't believe. It's not that. It's because the Bible, where you get the concept of God, that is called and referred to as God's Word, says in Psalm 121:7 that God will watch over your life and keep you from harm. And harm happens.
Well, I mean, if we're going to interpret Scripture, we have to be very careful because that's a statement to a specific Jewish audience. He's speaking to a specific group of people. He made a promise to certain people. He makes certain promises to certain people. Sometimes he makes generic promises to everyone. But regardless of whether you like that or not, Psalm 121 is about him speaking to a very specific group of people in a temple. It's even a temple worship song.
So why should we trust the Bible?
So the answer to why we should trust the Bible. Yeah, so what I would give to that, I mean, my answer is I just trust it, obviously. But if you want a justification of it, I would use the two books that came out not too long ago. Bart Ehrman's came out a longer while ago. Y'all are probably more familiar with it, I assume. And I've actually forgotten the title of it off the top of my head right now, but y'all are probably familiar with it. Anyway, it's the argument that the Christian orthodoxy about the person of Jesus Christ corrupted the Scriptures. Something about the corruption of the early canon or something. What's it called? No, that's a new one. Bart Ehrman's new book, Misquoting Jesus, came out after that. This is a more scholarly work before that. And I'm not insulting the other one. I mean, he did it deliberately as a more scholarly work. He's a great textual critic, Bart Ehrman is. Dan Wallace, who's also a great textual critic, responded to that with a book about exactly the same issue, saying that Dan Wallace was basically, that Bart Ehrman was arguing the wrong thing. Based on those two books, if you want to read more about it and get your own view of it based on those, I would just contend that the Bible is to be trusted because we trust everybody else's works in the history of the world. We look at Plato's works and believe that they make sense. The evidence for classical works of literature and history is 1/1000th as substantial statistically as the evidence, the manuscript evidence for the Scriptures that we have. So one of the issues that you have to resolve when you're saying, should I trust the Scriptures, is just, did they actually come from that time period? Were they actually legitimate documents from that time period? Most people give an answer to the Wikipedia presumption that, the canon was formed in 325 and that's when all the documents were compiled and everybody, and that's just not true. We have documentary evidence, manuscript evidence, dated by objective scientists, some believers, some non-believers. Go to the Center for the Study of New Testament Manuscripts. It's a scientific organization. There are some believers who are in it, and there are some non-believers who are in it. They're just historians and archaeologists and textual critics. That's what they do. Bart Ehrman can't be called a believer, right? So he does textual criticism as well. Now, he comes to skeptical conclusions as well, but he doesn't doubt the veracity of the evidence about these manuscripts. We have 43% of the New Testament, all of the Old Testament, obviously, the New Testament, 43% of the New Testament in completed manuscript form we have in 2nd century manuscripts. That's during the 100s already. And the idea that, somehow or another this book is just a manipulation of some conspiracy of people who are trying to hide something. It's just, by that you would just have to say Plato didn't exist. You would be one of the Shakespearean conspiracists. He didn't write Shakespeare, someone else wrote it. All of those kinds of things are much more defensible as arguments than the case that the Scriptures are not legitimate documents from the time that they purport to be from, and that they have something that we ought to look at. Now, beyond that, the content itself, we can make further arguments, but just the manuscript side of it seems to be the thing that most people run to first. And all the manuscript evidence says, if you're going to believe any work in history came from the people that it says it came from, then the New Testament is that way. 6,000 extant manuscripts that we have right now, just in terms of the New Testament.
Yeah, I think
And I can read the language, by the way, so don't give me that time. Yeah.
All of them? All 3 languages?
Hebrew and Greek, not Aramaic, but I don't care. I can go without that.
We can
I can go without the book of Daniel.
We can Google that stuff.
I got a friend who reads it.
Any holy book that supports slavery in any form isn't that holy. I'm not doubting the manuscripts.
That's just rhetorical try.
I'm not doubting the manuscripts were written. I'm talking about the claims. If someone here tonight told you they saw someone rise from the dead, you wouldn't believe it. But someone wrote it down a very, very long time ago, and you seem to take that as fact.
Are we going to talk about the slavery or the resurrection?
Both.
I'll go both ways.
Go ahead.
All right. Do you have? I'm not trying to impose an unfair question on you here. If you don't want to answer this, it's fine. Do you have credit cards?
I've actually paid them all off.
No, I'm not asking if you were in debt.
Thank you.
Just do you have credit cards?
No credit cards.
If you have credit cards, then you believe in slavery as much as the Bible does. This is how the Bible talks about slavery.
No.
It does.
Dr. Cooper, no one
The slavery in Scripture is very simple.
No one
Slavery in
captured me
Scripture
and
is
forced
very
me to have a
simple.
credit card.
No, the only slavery that's endorsed in Scripture is very simple. The guy got to a point where he couldn't support his land anymore, and his family was about to starve to death. He could sell off his land to some other landowner and give himself to him as an indentured servant.
That is an indentured servant.
For a particular period of time.
Sure.
Other people did all kinds of other slavery, but they're not endorsed in Scripture.
Well,
they're restricted,
that's
they're
not
held
the
down, but they're not endorsed.
That's not the only form of slavery in the Bible.
It's not the only form that's mentioned, it's the only form that's endorsed. Case by case,
aren't fathers
list up and
allowed
down
to
the list.
sell their daughters at some point? And whenever they are taking over,
Never endorsed.
whenever they are taking over in war,
Never,
You will-
it is never endorsed, any more than
It is
polygamy
endorsed.
is endorsed.
It-
It happens, it was a common cultural practice, it's restricted in Scripture, but it's not endorsed. So it's a completely different thing.
I disagree. There are scriptures that say
You won't find
whenever you take over a specific town or city, you are allowed to take those people as
What it will
slaves.
say is, if you will look at them, what it'll say is, when you take the people, when you destroy the city, when you do whatever it is you do, then you must do these things
What's the
with the
difference?
slaves. Because it's restricting the behavior they were already participating in. Same thing. I mean, it's saying, what do you do with these? Do you just abuse them, mistreat them, and so on, like you were already doing, or can we restrict that? And they restricted it. You gave laws. So that's the deal. It's not old. It's not. This is the thing. When you use the word slavery, everybody hears Old South slavery. That's not even in existence in terms of Old Testament practice. It's just
I disagree.
Old South
Very
slavery.
specifically, we're almost out of time just on this topic already. But I know that it's unfair to throw out a bunch of contradictions to you, so I'm going to throw out one and see what you have to say about it. In Exodus 33:11, where it says that Moses was face to face with the Lord, and then John 1:18, where it says no man has seen God.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile?
Have you
those?
read the whole passage in Exodus? I mean, the story's very clear. Face to face, every time this expression is used in the Old Testament, it's a common Hebrew expression. It's a statement that says, I'm appearing before him. That's what it means. And his statement to God is, I want to see you. In this face-to-face encounter, he's saying, I want to see you. Show me your grace. Show me your glory. And in that passage, God says, well, I can't show you that. Nobody can see that. And so Moses asks for it again. And in Exodus 34, God actually bestows on him the privilege of seeing him by putting him in the cleft of a rock and covering him with his hand as he passes by so that he only sees the back of his garments or whatever it is. And I have no idea what all that means, but I do know it means even in the immediate context of the story, you can't imply that Moses was looking at God's face in some way. The statement, this expression is that he is appearing before God and pleading to see God. I mean, all you got to do is read Exodus 33 and 34 together, and in the story, that's what he's saying.
Can I ask one more?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll allow it.
2 Kings 2:11, that Elijah went up to heaven by a whirlwind.
Yeah.
And John 3:13, no one has ever gone up to heaven except Jesus.
Okay, we've had this discussion before, I think, and I'm not sure that this is clear. Heaven has 3 different uses that are common, and probably 50 different uses beyond that I don't know of. The 3 that are common are the sky, the sky that's immediately above us, the firmament, the stars and everything that's above us, and then where God is. Sometimes it's talking about one, sometimes it's talking about the other, and you just have to read it in context to know which it is. Elijah is caught up into the sky. That's what it's describing. And we don't know where he goes beyond that. I have no idea. They search for his body, don't find it. So we assume he also went up into heaven eventually. We assume that he also went up into God's heaven. Yeah, I mean, you're asking about the story. That's what the story says.
That's what's confusing. But then another verse says that no one has done that except Jesus.
No,
So
read the statement in John 3 again. This is Jesus talking about.
Right. It says no one has ever gone into heaven except Jesus. It didn't say Jesus exactly. It says the Son of God.
Well, yeah, he's talking about himself. But you're implying from that the idea is that Jesus is saying no one has gone to heaven yet.
No.
That's not his statement. His
No.
statement is no one else has ascended into heaven and then descended to the earth except the Son of God. All that whole passage is Jesus saying, I am uniquely the Son of God because I'm the only one who was there and then came here. I'm not just born here. I descended down to the earth. It's a completely different passage than how you're using it.
Sounds confusing.
Okay.
It's very simple.
All right, we're going to move on to the next topic, which we already touched on a little bit. David, why does evil exist?
Now I'm interested in hearing your answer to this one.
Evil in a spiritual form. It's important to differentiate evil. When you look up different definitions of evil, you can refer to a smell as evil. You can say that it's evil, that it's not pleasant. In our language today, we could say something that happens to a person, as I mentioned, a child molester or a rapist. We could say that that is an evil act. But evil in the spiritual form, someone being able to blame their negative actions on a spirit or to say that that's evil, I do not believe that does exist. I do not believe there is an evil spirituality. And in many cases, some of the most evil acts that we've seen, such as the September 11th attacks, things like that, these huge religious wars, typically are happening because someone thinks they are doing the work of a creator. It was Stephen Weinberg, I have a quote here from him. He said, "Religion is an insult to human dignity. With or without it, you would have good people doing good things and evil people doing evil things, but for good people to do evil things, that takes religion." Evil happens, bad things happen, because we were not created by a perfect being. Bad things happen because there is not a perfect, powerful creator watching over us and protecting us and guiding our lives. I think that for the atheist to say, yeah, bad things happen because we're a product of evolution, because we're not perfect, and we had no divine intervention or divine creation. Of course bad things are going to happen, and something that one person may consider perfectly fine, another may consider evil. Life is hard. We're evolving. We're imperfect.
Evolving toward what? Evolving toward what? Why do you keep saying perfect? Why would evolution ever lead to some perfection? What's the perfection you have in mind?
I don't think we'll ever get there. I'm not saying
that. Where? I don't even know what you're comparing it to.
It doesn't have to be compared to anything, and there doesn't have to be an ultimate goal.
So for you, if a child molester believes that what he's doing is the pleasant thing to do in life, and many do, that's just his view. It's not evil. What he perpetrates is not evil. It's just unpleasant to be into society.
I consider myself a moral relativist in that respect. I don't think that.
Well, you don't. I know you don't. That's why I'm pointing out that that's hypocritical to say.
No, it's not, because you couldn't. In order to say that that could be a good thing, someone would have to give a reason why.
They're just evolving. They're just a creature that's evolving.
Why raping that child could somehow be in the best interest of that child.
Well, that argument's been given throughout history. In Greek culture, it was given commonly.
It's just
part of bringing them into adulthood and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, no. It's just.
The argument was made, but you still believe it's evil. That's what I'm saying. You do believe in something being evil.
I would believe that it's wrong for that to happen.
Okay, by wrong and evil are really closely tied together in my mind at this point. So I'm trying to figure out, if you don't believe in an objective evil, how you're drawing the line at child molesters and saying, but they are. I don't believe in anything evil, but they are evil.
Well, there's a discussion here on morality.
Yeah, we can say.
So yeah, let's say for that.
Sorry about that.
But as far as why evil exists, why bad things happen, my response is because there is no divine guidance. And if there was some sort of very powerful, all good, loving creature watching over us, there would be no excuse whatsoever for these bad things happening.
See, I really don't get that at all, that statement at all, just in the sense that if I, for instance, have a child with a tooth that is bad, then I take them to the dentist and they hate it, but I have a reason for taking them to the dentist. Now, I don't know that we have a tooth that's bad in creation. I don't care about that. I'm not answering that. I'm simply making the point that sometimes unpleasant doesn't mean unjustifiable, inexcusable, or incomprehensible even.
Understandable, but actually that is required for the tooth to be pulled, or the child would go through an excruciating pain to have that tooth removed.
Right.
So it's actually a good thing for that to happen. Now we know that
In the end, it's a good thing. Not when it happens,
right,
but in the end.
Right. Well, we know that that is required. The shot is required for the child not to feel any further pain. We don't know that this evil and suffering and tsunamis are required for heaven to be great. Nowhere in the scripture
Is
does
the child's, just to use the analogy, is the child's knowledge that it's going to turn out in the end what makes it justifiable? No, it's not. It's the fact that it will turn out in the end.
Right, but we
And
know
that's
that
all
to
I'm
be true.
contending.
We know that to be true. Are you just saying there's a chance that...
No,
that
I'm saying the child, which would be us, doesn't have to know in order for it to be the case. I don't even know if that's the reason evil happens. I'm not even trying to say why evil happens. I don't know. I have 15 theories I can espouse given the moment, but I don't know why. I really don't. I do know that it is in the end that things are made right.
Right.
And so when I say that, though, I'm not pretending I'm the adult in the analogy. I'm still the child. I just happen to have confidence that this shot is going to be okay because it's going to help my tooth. But if I didn't know any of that and I didn't believe any of that, it wouldn't change the fact that it would be worth having the shot. And so that's all I'm trying to say about what we believe about God, is that even if we don't know why it happens, our faith in Him is what makes us say, well, I don't have to know why it happens. I believe in that God who can make it right in the end.
I think to make that analogy, you're suggesting that tsunamis and devastation and rape and these horrible things that happen are somehow necessary for heaven. That is the same analogy
it's a very astute observation. I do not believe that, though. I mean, that's a fair criticism, though. I'm not saying it's necessary. John Hicks, there's this one guy who argues that there's a soul-making sense to this. That if you cannot have danger, you cannot have courage. If you cannot, all that kind of stuff. And he believes that the evil is necessary in order for us to become what we're supposed to be. I don't believe evil is necessary at all. I believe God can exist without evil, that evil did not have to come into the world. I believe it's a product of our free will, that we introduced evil into the world, all that kind of stuff. Why the consequences that are here are allowed is beyond my purview. I don't know. My faith, though, that God is the one who makes it right in the end, still sticks with me. So I don't believe it's necessary. I do believe that it follows now, in this world the way it is, that evil would be... The old traditional argument is, would it be better to live in a world with evil, with a free will, or without evil, and with no free will? And my answer even to that question is, with evil and a free will. It makes the world meaningful. Not the evil, but the free will.
So your answer for why evil exists is?
Because we have a free will. We are evil. We chose it.
I do not believe we're evil at all.
Yeah, but actually you do. Actually you do. This is one of those things that I don't get. So you believe that men should not be trusted for producing a scripture because they're sinners, but you don't believe they're sinners. So you believe we're good for producing a world that has this theistic bent to it, but you believe the theism is crooked. I don't get that.
No, I don't believe that. That was just one of my arguments, that if you take the book, hook, line, and sinker, and say that you think it's true, yet you turn right around and say that everybody is in a fallen world and all people are sinners and innately evil, why would you then trust those evil people that wrote that book? That doesn't make any sense. That was the argument I used.
Well, I know. I mean, obviously, we don't believe people wrote the book. We believe people were the tools that God used to write the book. That's what our faith is about. But on the other side, you have made the argument, maybe not tonight, but you've made the argument repeatedly that one of the reasons you don't believe the Bible is because it was written by evil men. Otherwise, do you believe instead that they were just fallible men, but not evil? They weren't trying to be deceptive. They were just,
I think
just
they
mistaken.
were, honestly, I think they were chauvinistic, power-hungry, archaic men that had no...
In other words,
about
they
the world.
existed in their culture.
Yeah, and they were trying, the world's first attempt at any understanding of rainbows and beautiful mountains and stars in the sky. They were very confused. And
They were just writing the best shot they could.
Absolutely. And at the same time, using that power for massive control And if I stood here as a man and told you to do this, you would challenge me. But if I say there's an invisible God behind me, you might not challenge me.
They were using that power for what?
Control.
Or by that power, do you mean the power they aggrandized by writing the scriptures, or do you mean the power of God? I'm trying to figure out what you mean by your argument.
That they were using religion, they were using belief.
So they are evil, or they're not evil? Are they evil for using religion like that, or are they okay?
Some of what they did is fine, some of what they did is pretty manipulative. And
is manipulative evil, or is it okay?
Well, when they say to stone to death homosexuals, yeah.
You think that's evil?
I think it's bad.
So you do believe in evil. So we're on time for the next discussion anyway.
Not
And the
spiritually.
next one is morals.
Let's go.
All right.
Actually, the next one is creation.
Yeah, I mean, we can keep doing moral evil arguments. It's not what that's kind of what we're on right now.
That's fine if you want to swallow.
Dr. Creamer, where do morals come from?
God.
Okay,
Right,
okay,
my turn.
Smalley.
Now, if you want to ask it in a more, for a better answer, deeper answer, I would just say you have to be very careful about how you use the word morals. Obviously, morals are used in some contexts simply to refer to cultural mores. Those come from the culture, of course. Different cultures have different practices. They do different things. But if you mean by morals what I believe about morals, the opposite of what David is going to say, I am a moral realist. I believe there actually is something moral. Then you have to figure out, why would we believe that an actual morality could exist? To say that it's anything derivative, for instance, of pleasure. So if you believe in what Thomas Hobbes gives us, psychological egoism, I'm pursuing pleasure, and I learn over time that I get more pleasure ultimately by living in a society where people keep their obligations than when they don't. Then in the same way I learned not to put my hand on a hot burner, I learned to keep my promises. If you believe that's all there is to morality, you're a moral nihilist. You don't believe morality is real. You just think it's this vocabulary, this verbal artifact of our self-pleasing nature. I'm just trying to get the best I can out of the world. I don't believe that. If you believe in that, you do have to have a constantly relativistic view of real morality. That is, you have to believe morality is nothing more than the expression of whatever culture or psychological features are in the person. Now, with that said, there are plenty of artifacts of real morality in everyone who lives in a culture anywhere, because I do believe morality is from God, and I do believe it's built into all of us, and I do believe it's evident in the fact that we all know that we, as I said earlier, screw up in our lives. It's apparent. And so with that said, my belief that it's from God, I do mean, but I believe I can argue for it more defensively in the sense that, for instance, Kant's understanding of rational morality, that morality is evident in the categorical imperative, that we know the only way we can use the word should is if we mean it's what everyone everywhere ought always to do. Means morality exists just as surely as circles exist. For people who know geometry and mathematics, I know the difficulty in that statement, but I believe circles exist. As surely as I'm wrong if I say that a circle is not, doesn't have a circumference that's equal to pi times its diameter or whatever. So there you go. So I think it comes from God. I think there's evidence for that.
So there are about 2 billion people on the planet that are Christians. Do you agree?
No, I don't. But there are 2 billion people who are in Christian cultures and who would identify themselves as Christians. Like I said, my particular belief about Christianity is there's something real about it only in this personal commitment of faith.
Okay, do you believe that...
But I do believe they're Christian in name, and that they would embrace that idea.
Well, do you believe that the God of the Bible inserts these morals into all of humanity?
Yes.
Or only in Christians?
No, all, everyone, everywhere, all, yes.
So even people like me who completely reject the existence of any God,
yes,
you think my morals are still from God?
Yes, I do. The real morality. Not your moral practices, not your mores, although yours are pretty good. I respect you. Yes. To give my judgmental approval of you, But I'm really not trying to be indicting by saying this. But not your actual practices, but the reality of what's right and wrong is as apparent in, in you as it is in anyone else.
So Muslims who would believe that their morals come from Allah, you think that their morality comes from Yahweh?
Well, Allah is just God. That's just the name for God.
We know the very, very different beliefs that they have. That they do not support Christianity. They do not believe Jesus is the Son of God.
Sure.
You think that the same God that you believe in, they believe it comes from the God that Muhammad was a prophet.
Well, I don't care which, at this point, I'm not saying that people know that it comes from God. I'm not saying that the morality that's in them is signed by God so that they look at it and go, oh, there's a God. I'm saying that God actually does it. So whether a person's aware of it or not doesn't have any impact on this. So it doesn't matter to me whether a person is born in an atheistic household and they're brought up to believe only in the secular ideals from the beginning to the end. It doesn't matter to me. I'm still saying that in this general sense, that morality is present in every person.
Right. When I was on your show, I asked you where my morals came from, and you said that's easy for me. You were raised as a Christian.
Yeah, for you it is easy.
So
because they're instilled a lot younger than you think. So.
But even people that are born in atheistic households, you think that those people think every living being has morals.
Has an awareness, yes, yeah, and actually that they have an awareness of what is right and wrong in a broad sense. Yeah.
See, for me, morality is about the well-being of the thinking being, whatever that being may be.
But you don't believe that's morality, you just believe that's pleasant, right?
Well,
because it's not evil not to promote well-being, it's just not unpleasant.
Not spiritually evil, where it's getting into semantics about the word evil.
Forget the word spiritual, that doesn't mean anything.
I don't like to use the term.
The word spiritual doesn't mean anything. For this conversation, I don't even know what that means. What I'm saying is morality a real thing, which is tied to the question, is evil a real thing? Because morality would be inherently opposed to evil.
Well,
if there's a real morality.
I don't like it when you make me speak your language, but
so let's figure out a way we can communicate. I really am willing to compromise the vocabulary if we can figure out how to communicate.
Well, for me,
I don't know what you mean by spiritual, except that for you the word spiritual means non-existent.
No, I mean that people tend to blame their negative actions on spiritual evilness.
Which you mean is a non-existent evilness.
I don't believe it exists, but I think that they're using it as an excuse. Because you don't
believe it exists.
Well, for me, morals are about consequences.
Okay, so you okay. Now we can go right ahead.
Each individual situation, not people, not individual.
Yes.
Each individual situation, I'm a consequentialist.
Yes.
One situation isn't always wrong, isn't always bad. Although there are some moral absolutes.
So that changes.
Only
those two statements are incompatible.
No,
you can't be a consequentialist and a moral absolutist.
No, let me say why. Let me say why. I knew you were going to have that reaction.
It just doesn't make sense.
I have no. Barry's going to laugh at that. No, my point is that, for example, I keep going back to this just because it's the most horrendous thing I can imagine. But someone molesting a child, raping, say, a 4-year-old,
right?
Okay.
And I know you believe that is wrong. I believe that.
Absolutely. And I would, just for lack of a better term, today, as I said here, I would probably call that an absolute moral, only because I don't think anyone could give me a situation in which that would be in the best interest of that child to be raped.
So here's the point I'm trying to make. You don't believe it's immoral, you don't believe it's evil, you just don't value what it produces. You don't like what it produces. You don't like what comes of it. There's no reason for you to say it's wrong, though, morally wrong. Now, I'm not saying you can't use the word morality about it. I know you do use the word morality about it. You say it's immoral. But what you mean by immoral is it brings about unpleasant, undesirable consequences. And that's what I'm saying is morally nihilistic. It doesn't. I'm not saying you don't use the word morality, and I'm not saying you don't have anything you care about. You do care about these things. But they're just because you care about them. I believe it's wrong because it's wrong, and that's it. If it brings about a good consequence or a bad consequence.
What gives you the authority to say it's wrong?
That's why I'm talking about God, but I would go beyond that and say reason. Reason dictates it, the categorical imperative.
Now, we agree on that.
Yeah.
Reason and logic, absolutely. But when you say that it comes from God, and here's where my challenge for you comes.
Right.
The God of the Bible, throughout the Bible, consistently breaks its own moral code that you say we're supposed to live by.
Yeah, obviously I disagree with that.
1 Samuel 15:3.
Yeah, where he's
When he tells Saul
and Agag.
to go wipe out the Amalekites, and even lists infants, nursing children,
Yeah.
even animals, women. He wants them all wiped out. The killing, slaughtering of innocent people, ordered by the God of the Bible,
Right.
which is where you say we get our morals from. That baffles me.
Well, first of all, the instance that you're giving in 1 Samuel 15 is a good example. I mean, these are the most difficult. 30 seconds for the whole topic here.
Just
Morality.
answer.
So yeah. So the first thing is, I mean, I've told you this before. For me, this is the most difficult question for believers to answer.
That's why I used it.
I mean, I think it's profoundly important. But I've also learned over time that the antinomies in Scripture, the things that appear to be contradictory in some way, are usually where the most important truths are. And this is one of those most important truths, even though I'm not 100% comfortable with where it goes or comes from. But the reality is, your statement, innocent people are being slaughtered, is just not within the theology of Scripture. There are no innocent people in Scripture. And we start out already under condemnation. The acts of God to bring about our conversion. Yeah,
I mean,
and again, I'm with you on that. I don't believe the infants are somehow circumstantially guilty in that moment.
Well, so that's what I'm asking. If no one could, if I would have to admit that I would at least consider one moral to be absolute, and that moral would be, harming a child who had no say-so in it,
right.
That you could never give me an example in which it was in that child's best interest, or that was even justified. But you're saying that because that infant is born a sinner?
No, I mean, if you want to deal with the technicalities of that particular issue, we're going to be in the weeds for
okay.
Because I'm always going to come back to eternity. That's what all of these things come back to for me. So if you say children don't have any possible good that comes out of the terrible things that happen to them in this world, I'm always going to say God makes things right for them as well as everyone else in eternity. That's what happens. Not everyone else.
I think we just approach it different ways. I think that you say,
because
I go ahead and acknowledge heaven exists and I'm okay with that suffering. My point
I'm
is...
not okay with the suffering. I'm not trying to say that. I'm trying to say it's not proof that God doesn't exist.
The real reason I use
That's
that...
all I said.
The real reason I use that one all the time. That's very important to me.
Yeah.
Because that's not a case where it's just a sinner or man that has fallen, that's made a bad decision. It was ordered.
Actually, it is.
It was ordered by God to do it.
Let me. I mean, I'll take a stab at this. I don't know how I'll communicate with everyone, but this is the reality of it. The choices that we make affect other people, whether we like it or not. Even in scriptural terms, there's just no way to get around that. So if some man in evil, with sin, breaks into a house and kills a family that was going to get ready for church the next morning and go be godly, and everything they were going to do. That is a consequence of that man's evil. And people do that with their families all the time. They make choices as adults that destroy their families. Drink this Kool-Aid. Move with me to Guyana. Whatever. So that happens all the time. So the fact that one person makes a choice to drive drunk and it kills other innocent people is exactly the same difficulty for me as the story of 1 Samuel 15. That children died as a result of horrible practices. They were killing their own children, offering them in sacrifice in fires that were going on with the followers of Agag and the Amalekites. So I don't have a full answer on why stuff like that happens. If anybody pretended they did, I think that would be absurd. My real answer to the issue that you're raising, which I assume is, with that kind of stuff being said in the Bible, why on earth would you believe in God? Is, I find it tragic if you think that finding some difficulty in a text of the magnitude of Scripture, even in T.S. Eliot, when I'm reading him, I would have to say exactly the same thing about it. That I find some difficulty in that portion of the text and therefore say, well, this is worthless, there's no reason to read this, is just the height of narrow-mindedness. And I know you're not narrow-minded, but I mean, for crying out loud, it's an entire book that reveals for us incredible depths of information. And as a student of literature, proper literature, Even just that. I wouldn't throw away the book because there's one portion of it that I have.
If that was the only verse,
Yeah.
I probably would have never brought it up because I would agree with you that you shouldn't throw out the entire thing because of that. But there are others. That just happens to be
But we
what
can
stands out the most.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this next topic kind of ties into this, so if you want to respond to what he said, go for it, David. Who's God in the Bible?
That's my question.
Yes, it is. That's what's on the sheet.
How is neither? How does that work?
Okay, well, interpret the question however you see it.
Okay, well, what is it? Colossians 2:9 says that in Jesus dwells all the Godhead bodily. Is that the one?
Yeah.
Yet, in Matthew, when Jesus is on the cross, he says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" I'll get to it, but that's something that's really confusing. That if Jesus is the same entity as God, who is he talking to? And then John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son. So he gave his Son, yet they are one. Personally, I think when we hear or when we read Jesus say that I and my Father are one, and we talk about being one, I think it's figurative. I think it's just as we get married today and say we've united as one, as a marriage. Jesus also talked about having his followers come together as one in Christ. So I don't think that he was talking about literally being God. I think that he was talking figuratively, I and my Father are united.
I'm just very confused about whether we're having a theological discussion about orthodoxy, or if we're trying to make a case for contradictions in the Bible, or
It's kind of all
what
over
you're
the
doing.
place. I mean, I don't know what I'm doing.
What I'm going to say is I know there are people who try to read Scripture to say Jesus isn't presented as the deity, but I'm not in that camp. I don't agree with them at all, and the interpretation of Scriptures, including John, profoundly so, but including John, including Paul's works, including Colossians, the very one that you mentioned, are definitely descriptive of Jesus Christ as the second person of what we come later to call the Trinity. And it is, just theologically, what it is God is a general descriptor and a descriptor of the Father. It's used both ways, God the Father. And when you're talking about God as a general descriptor, then Christian orthodoxy has held that Scripture is describing from hundreds of years, thousands of years ago, 2,000 years ago almost, that what it's describing is God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit, three persons, one God, one substance, one essence, and the whole point of the hypostatic union, which is a reference to Jesus being a union of two different substances, both God and man, which are incompatible, because God is not everything that man is, and so that's not possible for that to exist. That's the whole point of calling that a miracle and saying this is the miracle of history, that God would choose to become what he could not be, a man, that he would choose not only to become this thing that imitated man or looked like a man, but would choose to become a man who followed not only from heaven to earth, but all the way to the cross and the crucifixion to death, so that he experienced the whole thing of being a man and then obviously rose from the dead. That's the big point.
Trinity.
So as far as theology goes, this is just the Christian orthodoxy. It's a very simple picture. Jesus is speaking to his Father, and he refers to his Father as God.
I don't think there's anything simple about the Trinity. I think it's probably the most confusing
the answer
concept in Christianity. Can you take a moment to explain it, how you would to your congregation or anybody that you're preaching to? How can we possibly understand? And I've heard that, you're a father and you're an uncle.
No, none of that's right. None of that's right.
Good.
There are no analogies that work for the Trinity. It's a sui generis thing.
Not even the egg?
No. But this is the whole point. There is nothing like God. This is one of the difficulties and one of the beautiful things. This is one of the things we celebrate about worshiping God, that he's not like other things. And so what we learn about God are things that are similar to him from all these different angles. And so using language analogously, not just univocally, we're able to see these different features and facets of the nature of God and then have an understanding of who it is we're talking about. And the Trinity is the same way. It's a sui generis thing. So it is what cannot be in any other sense. He is one and only God, and that's why he is the only thing that is a Trinity. So is it similar to an egg? Well, in some ways it is, because there's three and yet it's one. Is it similar to water, steam, and ice? Yeah, in some ways it is, but in other ways it's not, because it's not a modality. So we learn a little about the Trinity by doing that, but it's a unique thing. It's just like if I pointed at a color and you said, well, you've got to show me another color that's just like that for me to believe in it. The Trinity is a unique thing. It's sui generis. So we understand it as much as we can.
I've actually received emails from Christian listeners.
I know, I'm sorry.
And one thing that really got me one time is one of the listeners said, I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, but one thing really bothers me. They believe exactly like you do, that there are three separate entities yet a part of the Trinity. Okay?
Three separate persons, one substance.
Right. Her email said that what concerns her the most is that God says to have no other gods before him, and then Jesus says the only way to get to the Father is through me. And that is their biggest problem with Christianity. They feel guilty.
Then I need to have a talk with them.
Guilty.
That's pretty quick.
I'll forward you the email. They say that they feel guilty praying to Jesus because it's very clear that you should have no other
This
God.
is the gift of God, that he would himself mediate his relationship with us. That is his gift to us through Christ. That's what we celebrate, that we don't go through a priest. We go through Jesus Christ himself, who himself is God and the mediator. So that's why we celebrate it.
I just think, honestly, the entire concept is not only confusing, but it sounds like
It's not similar to other concepts.
You really have to stretch, though, to make it make sense that there are three separate bodies.
I have to stretch to make sense of the fact that God would give a rip about me after I treated him like I did growing up. I can't make sense of that, but I believe he does. So,
Fair enough.
very
You touched on this before in the why should the Bible be trusted, but evolution or creation, what do you pick and why?
Oh yeah, we changed the order.
Yes.
Yes, it's like, wow, we're only there? These poor people. No, I think the question's misleading. There are lots of believers who are evolutionists. There are lots of believers who are old earth creationists, they're called. So they'll believe in a God who created the world and then allowed things to evolve. I don't personally believe that. That doesn't change this discussion. The question for me isn't also about whether creationism, again, I'm just clarifying terms so we're talking about the right thing, and if we need to change it some other way, you let me know. But creationism isn't, did it happen 6,000 years ago or 50,000 years ago or 8 billion years ago out there? The issue for me is, why on earth would someone pick the current scientific theory, even if it's 150 years old, and say, that's it. There's not going to be any more progress in scientific thought. That's what we're going to know about the world. That's how old it's going to be.
Who said that?
That's how things are going to happen. Those who have expelled, that's a good question. I mean, it's a viable question. Those who have expelled people who believe in intelligent design simply because they believe in intelligent design. Not for lack of evidence, not for lack of reasoning, not for lack of scholarship or credentials, but just because they believe in intelligent design. Not even that they don't believe in evolution, just that they believe in intelligent design and therefore question the randomness of the process that brought the world to be what it is right now. They're excluded from academic circles everywhere for just that reason by itself. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense. So this is the funniest thing about our relationship, David. I am much more of a skeptic than you are. You believe in science. You believe that it's telling you the truth about things. I believe that science is fantastic as a tool for solving problems. It's like an engineering and puzzle solving type thing. But that it doesn't tell us the truth about things, and all I'm doing is talking about, for those of you who've read it, Thomas Kuhn's Structure of Scientific Revolutions. It gives us great paradigms to work within for a little while, then we're going to throw it away, and we're going to think something completely, radically, fundamentally different about the nature of the world in whenever the next paradigm begins. And I think science is great for making things round and making them roll and making them cool and comfortable and all that engineering type stuff, but I'm never going to invest myself in science as a truth-telling.
You know, it's funny to me that you said, I think what everybody was shocked.
I don't believe my senses like you believe yours. You know, I don't believe they tell me everything that's true all the time. You do. You think if you just see something, you can believe in it. I don't.
Not always.
There you go. See,
Like
bringing you down.
Like water on a dry road. We see that, and then
Perfect.
it goes away.
Right.
But it's also my senses that corrected that. So it just depends on how you look at it. But for me,
Yeah, I'm not sure your senses corrected that.
whenever
Your
you get up,
senses told you there was water on the road, and then your senses told you later there wasn't water on the road. It was your reasoning that told you, inductively. Well, there must never have been water on the road. It must have been an apparition. That's not your senses.
because things don't just appear and disappear.
It's a different thing.
Except God's.
Because of your experience. Because of your experience, you say that. Inductively, you've
Right.
learned to reason that way. Things don't just appear and disappear.
So
that's internal. That's not sensation.
I want to address what you said about science just assuming that the current theory of evolution, that's it and stop. Because that's not the case at all.
Good.
There is constant scientific research done to where they thought these two species were in different parts of the world, and then they find a fossil that says, oh, it is here.
Within their paradigm. But not without. Not
Okay,
outside
so
the paradigm. You got
my
to be
point is
inside that
they
paradigm.
continue to do research. They continue to
Inside
find
their
links.
paradigm.
They continue to find links. They continue to find more and more fossils, and they're constantly updating their records, correcting mistakes they've made, and continuing to grow. The museums are filled with the evidence that they're always finding. There are news stories and constantly new information coming out about now, certain ways, ideas
Right.
of the origins of life.
Right.
It's the creationist that has one story. They're not getting any more revelations. They're not getting any more miracles. It's the creationist that has given up on continuing research on how life started.
You obviously have not read a book on intelligent design, right? I mean, this is the whole nature of why things are going the direction they're going. Things about intelligent design.
I will read a book on intelligent design if you will go with me to a museum.
Already been there. Because I don't care. I mean, I do care. Personally, I do care whether evolution is the way things happen or not, but it doesn't change this discussion. The question of whether the God of the Bible exists or not, for a lot of people, is a God who caused evolution to take place. Historically, evolution, is introduced by Aristotle in Physics, Book 8, Part 2. And he gives a perfectly clear picture of the idea of natural selection, Charles Darwin's natural selection, 2,000 years before Darwin posits it. And then he dismisses it with a simple line that says, but we know that's not the case, because things don't happen by accident. They happen on purpose. Because in their worldview, everything had a purpose. Everything happened because something intelligent was designed into it. There was an intellechy, a telos, a purpose built into it. And so he just dismissed it, just like that. By the time we get to Darwin, we've already been through the Enlightenment process, and we've already decided that maybe the moon just happens to go around the Earth because of the gravitational pull. We have gravity now, a natural cause in physics, force, instead of the idea that God is holding things together or something else in its nature makes it want to go back to the Earth, stuff like that. So we've changed our whole view of things so that by the time Darwin writes the same theory that Aristotle wrote, he finds an audience that says, and the reason it's adopted and the reason Darwin's own view changes from his original work, The Origin of Species, to his almost final work, The Descent of Man, or Ascent of Man, whichever way it goes, is that the culture was ready to say, maybe it looks like there was an intelligence behind it, but I think we can describe a mechanism that doesn't require that intelligence for it to happen. To that extent, I disagree with evolutionary theory. To the extent that it says there's no purpose behind the development of things, the way things go, then I disagree with it. So that's why I'm referring to intelligent design rather than creationism, because the real discussion here is, did something have something in mind when it started all of this? And my answer to that is yes, and therefore excludes naturalistic evolution.
It's interesting to me that we were talking about the Trinity. You said, when I told you it was very confusing, you said, there's just nothing else like it. That's why it's confusing. Yet when I talk about the origin of species or the origin of life happening being the only thing that didn't come from something thinking, that you completely reject. What about accepting that as just
I didn't say that's not. I understand how evolutionary theory works. I understand why they say.
But your particular position on creation is that God spoke everything into existence immediately at the same time. As far as animals are concerned, God made the animals.
Well, I mean, I actually do believe that. There are lots of theists who believe that God created the whole order and then used those mechanisms that everybody else describes as evolutionary to, lead things to where they are right now. Neither one excludes God. The point I was making, I wasn't trying to make the teleological argument. I'm not saying God exists because of the evidence of design. We can have that argument later if we need to, but I was simply making the point that our divide is over whether the world exists for a purpose or not. I don't believe you can argue that it exists for a purpose, it just happens to be here. And that's different than the view I have of the world, which is that it exists for a purpose. And the only way I could maintain that it exists for a purpose is by my belief in God.
So, in your belief, God created the earth and the species that inhabits earth. So, there's two main questions I have for you. The first one would be, we have proven that 99% of the species that have lived on earth at one time are now extinct.
Right, sure.
That doesn't sound very intelligent.
Well, I mean, why? I eat beef, so death of animals doesn't bother me. I'm not sure.
Yeah, but
what the issue
99%
is.
of the species naturally existing on Earth
But what difference does that make?
could no longer survive. In other words,
So what?
Obviously, it wasn't built for their survival.
It wasn't built for their survival today. I don't. What difference does it make to me whether that kind of amoeba is a viable part of the world anymore?
Okay, like just the other day, I don't know if you saw the news story. Literally, tens of thousands of fish, dead fish, washed up on the shores of Lake Erie.
Mm-hmm.
And they said it was because of what's called lake inversion.
Yes.
Where the cold
I'm
water
familiar with that.
turns to the front, reduces the level of oxygen.
Right.
The fish aren't smart enough to swim lower, so all the fish that are on a specific surface level,
Right.
they all just die immediately.
Yeah.
And you call this an intelligent design.
Yeah, oh yeah, sure. No, I don't have any problem with that. I mean, I'm not saying to you that the world is now the way it is supposed to be. I believe the world was created for a purpose, that we have failed to live up to it. Now, if we're going to go down the road of the teleological argument, which I did not go down.
No.
If you want me to create the teleological argument, you're going to have to let me do it. Don't argue against the teleological argument if I'm not raising it.
I'm not.
So, okay. I do not believe the world right now measures up to the purpose for which it was created. That's why I believe, that's the whole nature of the fall.
All those fish are dying because of sin?
I believe, oh yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Yes, but not because they sinned or somebody else sinned and caused the water to invert or something like that, but the whole world. This is the nature of Christianity, Dave. It's not confusing. The whole created order is affected by our fall. Because, now this is very simple, because your reason for being shocked is that you believe man is just something that exists in the whole of the universe. I believe, very simply as a believer, as a Christian, that God created the entirety of the universe for man. That's the whole purpose of it. Okay. And that's the nature of our existence. Just the nature of it.
Okay, but why would the fish suffer due to our choices against God?
Again, I don't know the link between a hurricane and the fall. I just know.
You think hurricanes
You weren't asking everything, whatever. It doesn't matter. If it goes wrong, the nature of it is, it's because it's part of the world. The reason for that is because the world exists for man. Man is the thing that God created the world for. That's the whole point of the scriptural story. It's not like that should be a surprise to anybody who's written on it.
Wow, I think that the reason the fish are dying, the reason most of the species are extinct, all of these things could be answered if you realize there is no powerful creator that started everything. There is no intelligence behind it. It's evolving. A lot of times it fails, and sometimes it gets it right. And it's a continuation of life, and one day it'll probably stop. When
You
you look at it
believe the universe
scientifically,
has no purpose, and therefore you believe
I think
there
our
is no
purpose.
God.
I think our purpose is whatever we make it.
Well, if we are going to make it whatever we want to make it, do the pedophiles get to participate in that or not? Well, come on. Are we going to make it or not? Are we doing whatever we want or not?
They're obviously causing harm to children.
Okay. So David, how important are churches to American society?
They'd be a lot more important if they start paying taxes. I can tell you, a lot of people even that are now non-believers will tell you that they feel like church at some, in some level of their life was a positive influence on them. They feel like they get their morals or whatever from that church. Yet, there's a lot of damage that's done as well. Some people will say, well, when I was 16 and 17, I was going to do some horrible things, and the only thing that kept me in check was God's watching. And in that respect, if just the threat of punishment stopped you from doing something horrible, and later, even as a non-believer, if you look back later and say, man, I'm glad I didn't do that, that would have been really stupid, then I can't say it's negative. I can't say that it's all horrible. However, there are a lot of people who still carry with them a lot of anger, a lot of betrayal, because they feel like they've been lied to. They feel like they've been controlled. And as we're going to talk about in the next debate, young teenagers who are growing up having tendencies toward homosexuality, because of the church, they withdraw. They take that inward. They have psychological issues, sometimes committing suicide. I think that it's just like with any society, just like with any business, there's good and bad of the churches. Do I want to see churches completely wiped out from the country as an atheist? As an American, I can tell you absolutely not. I think people should have the right to go into their buildings, whatever those buildings are, and worship. I think they absolutely should. Do I think those churches should be able to raise money tax-free and then endorse candidates or propose laws such as Proposition 8? In California, absolutely not. Absolutely not. They should not be allowed to do that.
Are you going to pick and choose who gets to represent their values in the culture?
Yes, it's called tax-exempt.
What do you
If
think?
you have a tax-exempt
Do you
status,
believe
you're not supposed to
NGOs
be
should be
political.
taxed? Do you believe NGOs should be taxed? Non-government organizations. Do you believe the Red Cross should be taxed? Do you believe, come on, let's be fair about it.
My point is...
I don't care whether the church is taxed or not, but that's a silly,
No, well, my point is, as a nonprofit, you're not really supposed to be political or endorsing political
What difference
action. You're
does it
supposed
make
to be
whether-
helping people,
No,
not taking away their rights.
Listen, do you know when that law came to pass that we said, it's not even a law, it's an IRS regulation, that if you're a nonprofit, you can't be politically biased? Do you know when that came up?
No.
It's in the 1950s or early 60s, I guess it was the 60s, when it was in the 50s or maybe the early 60s, when Johnson was running for Senate, though, Lyndon Johnson. He got it passed because he was being opposed by certain churches in Texas. They didn't want him to be the senator. That's when that was passed. It has nothing to do with anything other than political manipulation. The idea that we're going to say to people in free-thinking societies or in churches or in the Red Cross, you can't speak your values at anywhere, anytime. It doesn't make any sense. I don't understand saying, I promote freedom of conscience, I promote equality for all of our citizens, and we're going to do that. Now, if you want to say, no charitable organization should receive tax-exempt status, then that's a separate argument. Say they shouldn't be tax-exempt, make that argument. I don't care. I don't care whether the church is paying taxes or not, any more than I care whether the Red Cross is paying taxes or not. That's a separate argument, a separate issue.
Entirely, that would be a financial discussion. The point here is how important our church is to society, and I think they could be a whole lot more helpful.
You were taking jabs based on the fact that they're not paying taxes and they do speak their conscientious opinions.
Not that they just speak their conscientious opinions.
Can they not have a conscientious opinion about someone running for president?
Well, I guarantee you, not everybody in that church wants the same person to be president.
Maybe that's why they have someone who stands up and tells them. That's
who to vote for?
I don't care. My point is, who am I to tell the guy who's standing up to speak what he believes in, what he can or can't say? Why would I say that to him? Am I going to get up and say, vote for Romney, vote for Obama? No. But am I going to tell some other guy he can't? Why would I do that? Why don't I let him speak what he wants to speak?
Well,
it's
I
his
think
congregation, let them quit.
I think the point is people will give money. People will give money to churches because of charitable acts on their behalf. They know that they're going to be doing positive things with that money. They know that they're going to be helping the homeless,
So
feeding
if
the
they don't
homeless,
want to hear
and
it,
things
let
like
them
that. No. I'm saying that they're giving that money thinking this is going to go to positive things. We're going to have a dinner for this person's family who someone died, and we have these positive things. They don't really always understand that
Wouldn't
sometimes
they
that
view
money,
their
sometimes that
values?
money is going to go to take rights away from somebody else. That's
Wouldn't they view their values and the promotion of their values as a positive thing? They would view it that way. That's why they joined that church. That's why they give their money to it, even after the guy gets up and says the stuff he does.
You know as well as I do, as a preacher yourself, not everybody in that organization or congregation or everybody that's giving money.
If they all agreed, nobody would have to speak it.
Not all with your values. They don't always agree with your values.
That's the whole point.
That's my point.
That in the congregation, there are going to be people who disagree, and then a pastor gets up and he speaks this prophetic word, and he says, this is the way it is. He may be right or he may be wrong, but that's the point of them being a congregation, that someone is up there saying, this is the truth, you ought to believe it. And if they can't say that anymore, I'm not sure where the freedom of conscience exists. So.
We're going to have a closing statement at the podium, 5 minutes. Dr. Creamer, you're up first.
When David was beginning his presentation, his opening statements, he made some of the claims, this Jesus shows up and this really old hearsay that's no longer authoritative and so on, and all you got to do is believe. You just believe that this is the case, and I'll let you come to my heaven instead of going to hell and suffer forever and all that kind of stuff. And I think there's some mistake in this whole discussion about the nature of that belief. I think that what David conceives of as belief sometimes is simply mental acquiescence. So if there's enough evidence, I'll believe it. I think David actually believes that there is objective scientific factuality that shapes his mind about the world. I think he's sincere in that. I think he believes it. But the reality is that we are not, even primarily, but certainly not solely, rational creatures. We're shaped by certainly emotional and psychological things. I know you get that in your studies. You know that. We are shaped by things that are not rationally defined. That's why teenage boys behave like they do around teenage girls, or anything female. It's not rational. It's just what they do. It's coming out of them in a different way. And one of the ways in which we are not purely rational is that we are volitional as well. Doesn't mean irrational, it's just not part of our rational element. I have reason, and that shapes the decisions I'm going to make, the volition that I have. And I have other things that shape it as well, my psychology and background, but because of what I believe about it, I also have this freedom in that to make a choice. And the reason I'm saying all of this is because it's not just a matter of harvesting certain pieces of evidence. Well, you have the evidence of these archaic, hearsaying, foreign language statements about a resurrection, and you believe that, you don't believe anything else. It's not just that. It's not just that I had a stack of evidence and it all said, oh, sure enough, Jesus did rise from the dead. Suddenly I'm a Christian and I'm okay. I get to heaven and appear before God, and he says, well, did you believe or didn't you? And I go, I'm not sure. I think the evidence added up. Yeah, I think I did believe. Well, okay, you get in. It's not like that at all. That's not what we're saying. It's not what we're describing. What I'm talking about is faith as a commitment that we make. And I believe the divide between myself and David isn't intellect. He may be smarter than I am. I'm not saying I'm on his same level. I don't care. I'm saying the divide is not intellect. The divide is not evidence that's been given to us or not given to us. The divide is not whether we've read enough or not. The divide is a matter of faith. I have faith in one particular thing. One moment in all the history of the world shapes my faith, the resurrection. That one moment. That's what it all comes down to. David Hume said that's when he wanted to argue against the supernatural, he drew it all down to the resurrection. And he said, this is why you shouldn't believe in the resurrection. For me, everything comes down to the resurrection. Because I believe the testimony and witness of the resurrection and its impact on history and on people who have testified to me about it, then I am shaped by that faith. Now, you don't have to agree with me about it. I can't give you a stack of evidence that will force you to commit your life to the man I believe rose from the dead 2,000 years ago. But that's what I mean when I say I have faith. And David has faith in a different direction. He can say it's passive and not active, but it's just as active as my faith. He has faith in objective information and scientific knowledge and sense data and reason, inductive logic and deductive logic put together into this common sense, but which is, I don't know what it is. Anyway, I'll let him define it. But he has faith in something different. Now, we can have this discussion later if we need to have it. We can bring it up again. He gets to go after me anyway, so I'm sure he'll bring this up. But he's choosing to believe one set of things that cannot be proven. The idea of the scientific method cannot be proven or demonstrated. Hume's fork can't be proven or demonstrated. It is reasonable. There's good evidence for having faith in it, but you can't prove it. And my faith in the resurrection. We make a choice, a commitment to leap off in this direction or that. Well, here's my commitment, to leap off in the direction of Christ. It's not any more irrational than the commitment to leap off in the direction of bodies of study that have overturned themselves throughout all of history and will again, and conclude that we know all things about the universe through our senses. It just doesn't make sense to me to do that. So I don't.
Belief isn't a choice. Dr. Creamer and I disagreed about that on his highly esteemed FM radio show.
Yes.
I don't think that anyone in this room, knowing what you know today, could force yourself to begin believing in Santa Claus. It's not a choice. You analyze the evidence if you care enough. If you're apathetic, it doesn't matter, but you probably wouldn't be here tonight. You analyze the evidence, and it either makes sense to you or it doesn't. If it doesn't make sense to you, yet you continue to go through the motions, you're not being authentic. You're not a believer. You're just perpetrating the actions of a believer. I don't have faith in the traditional sense. There are multiple definitions of faith, just like with evil. When referring to trust, do I trust some certain things? Sure. I trust the scientific method, like you said, because it provides results over and over. It is tested. It is proven. I trust results in science. We've never seen someone rise from the dead. That is not something that we can say we've seen that over and over and over. It's faith and faith alone. Our morality, just to summarize the topics tonight, our morality certainly doesn't come from a book where the leader of that book slaughters thousands of innocent people. All Christians don't even agree on Jesus being one with God or the Son of God individually. There's still confusion among that, including the Trinity. Evolution, despite what he said tonight, has been proven beyond a shadow of a doubt to be scientific fact. And in order to be a creationist, you must believe in magic. And I'm not using that as an insult. I'm saying the basis of intelligent design or the creation theory is that a powerful being spoke something into existence. It's magic. Bad things happen in the world and continue to happen because there was no powerful being watching over it. There is no reason to believe one is. In the Bible, with hundreds of contradictions, mistakes in translations, and overall absurd claims, simply can't be trusted to offer any absolute information about anything. And that is why the existence of the God of the Bible is not just improbable, but impossible. Thank you.
Okay, there we go. My question is for the atheist. You put all your faith in the resurrection. You believe. Now, are you aware, you've got to be, you're a smart guy, how do you reconcile that story with the fact that it's repeated over time? Horus, Dionysus, Mithra, they all have the same myth of a virgin birth, God coming down and being crucified and resurrected.
Sure.
It's repeated over time, half a dozen times at least.
Sure.
So how do you reconcile those known facts, those known mythologies, with yours?
Well, how would I believe in a God whose entire plan for the redemption of his creation entailed sending his own son to die for our sins and then rise from the dead to reassert his authority over that creation and provide life for everyone who is here? How would I believe in a God whose intent of redemption from the beginning was that and didn't communicate the need for that to the whole world? And so in the same way that C.S. Lewis argues for it in Till We Have Faces, for instance, I believe all of those myths are evidence that designed into us as a belief. And every corn king and resurrected God is evidence that designed into us is knowledge that without a death and a resurrection, we can't live. This is where we are.
You think the Creator would take the time to put that idea into each person that's born, yet allow for the wrong gods to be in those persons' minds?
The fact that people have the ability to manipulate and twist and change and turn and all of that is because I believe in free will, obviously. So the fact that people can manipulate it and turn it and twist it and change it and miss it and abuse it and everything else doesn't change what it is itself.
To your point, many of those predate Christianity.
Yeah,
I think that's another.
No, that's my point. It's part of the general revelation. I believe.
So the third or fourth time it was proposed, that's the correct.
It's not proposed. It's when it happens. I mean, this is what it means, right? For me to have faith in Christ. What do you think I'm going to believe? Of course, I believe because Christ actually rose from the dead. It makes sense that people would have been taught. It's really funny to me that it does not even seek. This is the ironic thing about this attitude, this approach. Even if the resurrection took place, your arguments would prevent you from believing in it. Even if it took place. William James is the one who said, I would not adopt any philosophy that would cause me to deny something even if it were true. And your arguments would force you to reject this historical idea, whether it's true or not, the resurrection. Even if it were true, you couldn't believe it. So that's a shame.
It being true and having evidence of it being true are two different things.
My point here is simply that if I'm looking at the universe having already put my faith in God, how would I look at the universe without seeing it at the purpose that God puts into that universe? And so if you're going to describe to me a universe that's evolutionary, then I'm going to look at the other side and say, oh, I believe it if it is evolutionary. It was designed because I'm going to see purpose.
Let's go to the next question.
You said that evolution has been proved 100% scientific fact. But is it possible to prove anything 100% in science? And wouldn't that preclude discoveries in the future, like with the theory of relativity? Would that...
Well, what I mean by that is that we know that evolution is real. It's when people say, "Oh, it's just a theory." The generic term for theory means it's our best guess. That's not what it means in science. What theory means in science is this is the answer which explains these facts. So evolution has been proven, but no, that it doesn't mean that it's going to stop anything. If anything, it means that we're going to continue researching to continue to find more answers.
What does it mean to say evolution has been proven? I don't even, what do those words mean? Falsifiability is the definition of what makes something scientifically verifiable. Even if it's been verified to this point, it hasn't been proven.
You know, gravity.
That's just not even possible.
Gravity is a theory.
Do you even know what gravity is? This is the whole point.
No, I've never heard of it.
Help me here. Gravity, come on, give me a break. Gravity isn't even, physicists don't stand up and say, oh, I know what gravity is. What they know is how to use the word gravity to describe what appears to be a force that has these effects, right?
Okay.
So what is it? Little things that go out and grab things and pull them back? What is it? What is gravity? What's the object? What's the thing that it is? We don't know. Nobody knows. No physicist knows. No. theorize models of the universe so they can come up with some
Are
way
you
to say what
suggesting
it is.
that gravity doesn't exist? Like the way you're saying evolution?
I don't even know. That question doesn't mean anything.
Exactly.
Because the point is, we have a concept of gravity. I'm not saying apples floated before Isaac Newton. I'm saying to you the answer to the question about why apples fell to the earth was different before Isaac Newton. It's different now than it was under Isaac Newton. With Isaac Newton, we were satisfied to say, I've got a word now, gravity. I understand what's happening here. But once we got to quantum physics, we said, oh, wait a minute. Gravity's not just like gasoline in the engine. What is it? What on earth makes things come towards each other? They don't know. So they changed their scientific theory.
I just want everyone here to take a moment and go to talkorigins.org. It is a fantastic website which very easily explains evolution. If you have any more questions.
All right, next question. Questions for the doctor, and thank you for being here. Majority of religious people believe in the power of miracles, or power of prayer. You can pray, college student can pray at night before his math test, and God will help him or bless him and help him pass his math test, and God intervenes there.
Are we going to use that example? Because that changes it. That's not, I don't agree with that.
Well, the majority of Christians, or majority of religious people.
No, the majority of Christians who are mature would say, stop praying that prayer and start studying. It should be different than just the self-serving, just
Okay,
nonsense.
well then we'll change it to something like God prevented me from tripping and falling and breaking my arm. Okay, so He prevented me, He saved me, and alerted me that I wasn't going to break my arm. Something menial was hurting or scratching my arm. Or somebody that gets a...
Wait a minute, are we going to say, are you talking about that in response to like prayer? Or are you saying that was a miracle?
Let me finish my whole statement and then you can... So God can intervene and help. If we pray, God can protect us. He'll prevent me from tripping and falling and breaking my arm. Or somebody who's terminally ill, God can get them through their cancer. He can cure the cancer or get them through surviving a fatal car accident. So we have one end of the spectrum where God can prevent me from scratching or breaking my arm, or God can prevent me from dying from cancer. Two very different spectrums of pain. But if we were to chop my arm off right now, there's no amount of prayer that can grow that arm back. Losing my arm is worse than scratching it or breaking it, and losing my arm is far less worse than dying of cancer. Why can't God meet me in the middle?
Why can't God meet you in the middle?
Why can't He grow an arm back? Why can He can cure cancer?
How is that meeting you in the middle rather than just giving you everything?
What he's saying is between the scratch not being that big of a deal and curing cancer being a huge deal, losing an arm would be somewhere in the middle. Why can't He regenerate for amputees?
Okay. I understand what you mean.
Everybody in here could pray. We can have the whole world pray, and we could sit here all day, and I could chop off my arm, and we would know without a shadow of a doubt that the arm would not grow back.
You want to try?
But there's a majority of...
Let me suggest you not do that.
But there's a majority of religious people that believe that, with the right amount of prayer, God can get them through their cancer or cure the cancer even.
Right.
So I don't see the logic in that.
Yeah, there's a real, this is again more theological than it is apologetic, so I apologize to people who don't want to hear this, but just theologically, we just say, that's silly to think that you just get whatever you ask for. That's just not it. We believe, obviously, for us to believe in God and think that we can manipulate Him and get what we want would be silly as faith. We don't practice that faith. We don't believe that faith.
Do you
we
not
believe
pray
God
for...
has a bigger plan than we do. We don't understand it. We don't know exactly what's going to come of it. And we can ask, but we can't control.
So then what's the purpose of praying during cancer?
Let me let him go.
Well, it's kind of the same thing. It's kind of the same thing. At the end of the sermon, would you say, we pray that God will keep everybody safe on the way home? Or
sure,
our thoughts and prayers are with you. What does that mean? Would you pray for a loved one to have their cancer cured?
Of course I do.
But
and I'm willing to. And I am willing to believe that God can do anything, even miraculously. But when He does it, I don't say He had to do that, or it's because I prayed for it even. I don't do any of that. If it's good, I give Him thanks for it. If it's bad,
4 or 5 minutes left. Right?
Okay.
All right, let's make it short, sweet, guys.
Okay. Given that the both of you come from two different worldviews, is it possible to have any sort of epistemological neutral ground? Some theories of apologetics say no. Some theories of apologetics say yes. So I would like to hear both of your thoughts on, is it possible to have a neutral epistemological neutral ground, given that your worldviews are so diametrically opposed?
Yeah, it's a good question. A very difficult question in our culture in particular. My answer would come in the fact that I did try to find common ground on 2 of the 3 elements of epistemology that I mentioned in my opening statement, to say using reasoning, meaning deductive reasoning, analytic, relations of ideas reasoning, and using sense data, so inductive matters of fact type reasoning. I think those we could connect on. I mean, I think David believes in rationality, even universal rationality, although I'm not sure if you're still on that or not. But I think David believes in rationality. I think he believes in sense data and inductive reasoning. And so we're able to discuss on those grounds. I still believe in, I think most all of us do, we just don't like to admit it, I still believe in authoritative knowledge as well. That is, what in the Middle Ages they would have just said, well, it's revelation, therefore it's true. I still believe we believe that. It's the same reason most people in this room believe in Paris. You've never been there, but you have enough data from other people who give it to you that you just say, yeah, I'm going to believe that. Or you believe the news anchor, or you believe your parents, or whatever it is. So we tend to believe that stuff, and it rises to the level of knowledge. I doubt you would agree with that, rising to the level of knowledge. So on 2 out of the 3, I think we were able to connect, and maybe you're able to get somewhere with that. The thing is, I don't believe that that connection leads to faith. I think it only leads to a conversation. But conversation is better than murder.
All right, next question.
Are you playing?
Yes, my question is to David. Okay. You showed on the question of morality, you showed that you were very upset, very angry, or not angry, but did not believe that it was right for innocent children to be killed in all this. My question to you is, then what is your belief about the unborn? Do you believe they should be killed?
That's a great question. I don't ever want anything that's living to be killed. I don't, except for beef in his case. But if your question as far as abortion is concerned, as far as late-term abortions, is it ending a life? You know what? It may be controversial in the atheist community. I think it would be ending a life. I don't have a problem saying that. But I'm not willing to say that an unborn fetus should have more rights to a woman's body than she does. That's my stance on that. So, do I agree with it? No. Do I think it's a great idea? No. Do I love it? Is anybody pro-abortion? No. Nobody's pro-abortion. Nobody likes to see that. However, I could not ever say to anybody that an unborn fetus should have more rights to a woman's body than she does. Or that the government should regulate a woman's own decisions about her own body.
So do you believe that life begins conception?
No.
Scientifically?
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
All right, next question.
Thank you.
My question is for Dr. Kramer. So for groups of people throughout history in the world, like the Aztecs or the Mayans or ancient Chinese or Aboriginals in Australia who never had the knowledge of the resurrection, do they get another way of getting into heaven or reconnecting with God without the knowledge of the resurrection? Or is the resurrection not actually necessary for the salvation of mankind or their reconnection to God?
Yeah, the answer to the question has 2 different parts to it. I don't believe there's any means to eternal life outside of Jesus Christ and the resurrection. That does not mean inherently, this is not my view, but that does not mean inherently that other people can't be included in that. Some people believe that they can be, that he can do the work to bring others who are without knowledge to that salvation. A lot of Christians believe that. I don't happen to believe that. But Old Testament saints, for instance, in the Old Testament before Christ came, they're certainly under the redeemed category without the resurrection having taken place yet, and so on. So there are lots of different possibilities for it. But no, I'm not trying to be equivocal about this. My view is very clear. Salvation is only in Jesus Christ. That's why we send out missionaries from our churches. We want people to know about the resurrection, and we do not believe there is salvation available to anyone outside of Jesus Christ and faith in
So
him.
if you could just clarify the one thing.
Sure.
people that died before.
It's a good question.
It
by the way.
is.
Thank
It
you.
is. Great. Thank you. I'm adding that to my list. People that die.
But this
before
one,
the
this one I don't struggle with. I mean, it's very straightforward.
People that died before the resurrection, are they in heaven, are they in hell, or are they in a waiting period?
The people who had faith in what they were told, and this is the Old Testament nature of it, like Abraham, you know, the Old Testament saints, are redeemed through the same power, but because of their faith in God, in Christ, ahead of time, whatever. So the point is, but the point is here, the reason that answer is unacceptable to most groups is because we have no clue how unacceptable we are to God. And that's what we're missing. So that's the picture. We are under more condemnation than we think. And we disagree on that one for sure.
Yes.
Well, we do have a schedule to keep to, so what I'm going to do, if you guys want to ask the questions, go for it, but the rest of you are free to go until 7:30, because that's when we're going to start our next debates. I'm going to adjust the time a little bit, but, so you guys...
I need a break too.
Yes, yeah, we're going to make sure, like, no more questions after the guy in the black shirt. But...
My question is for either of you.
could you be a little quiet while you're in here while the questions are still going on? Thank you.
My question is about the notorious word evolution. There's actually two very distinct terms, microevolution and macroevolution. I want to know how you feel how macroevolution overshadows and just completely takes the facts from microevolution, because they're two very different. And one, I believe, is rather true, like you can definitely see evidence of adaptation, you know. I don't know.
They're not really that different. Macro is just microevolution on larger scales. It just continues to happen throughout. We talked about that on the dogma debate. We had a paleontologist on, Rachel Brown, that made that exact point. And from the time she said that, I began agreeing with that it's really not that different at all.
Of course, I believe it is that different, so, but it's not, yeah, I mean, just on the same basis that you said, though. So I'm not sure I can contribute more than you said. Yeah, but it's a good argument.
My question's for the doctor. I was raised in a Muslim background, but I don't believe in a God now. My question is, how can you thank God for all the good things and not be mad for all the bad? Like, how can you...
This is a very important question.
Yes, and how can you just say, oh, well, eternity will make up for it?
Yes.
When there's people like that are even close to me suffering. And
Right.
how can you see that as fair? If this person or being controls the world, every aspect of it, you said the universe is created for man, no?
Yes, sure.
Yeah. How can he not, like, simply adjust things so that these innocent people are not suffering? I can't understand how you can believe in
That's a
something.
good question.
So the opening part of your question again was, I just want to hear this again.
Oh, I was born in a Muslim background.
So how can I believe?
So how can you believe? Well, you can thank God for all his good things,
Yes.
blessings, but
Right.
at
This
the
is
same
the
time,
yeah. Thank you for that. This is the part I would find would divide the believers in this room most distinctly from the non-believers in the room. That's a good question. Thank you very much for it. And it's very simple. I do not believe I have a presumption on God for anything good at all, because I believe in the fallen state, fallen nature, and sinful state, as David pulls the rhetorical gem out of sin, you know.
I like how you pointed at me.
But it is correct, the sinful state. Yeah. Because of that, I have no presumption on God at all. I have no right to go to him and say, why did you do this to me when anything bad happens to me? I deserve worse than has ever happened to me. I believe that about myself. I believe it about us as human beings. And yet, God has given us a world so generously good to us that we recognize it when things go wrong. And so I give thanks to him for doing good because I don't believe I deserve it. And I don't blame him, even though I deserve it, and it's his... I'm not saying he's not involved in it. I'm saying I deserve it, and worse, much worse. I'm sitting in an air-conditioned room at night having a civil discourse about a topic I'm fascinated by. If the rest of my life were agony and misery, and this were the only thing I received, it's more than I deserve. That's what I believe. And yet he's gracious enough to give us unbelievable goodness through our whole lives.
But what makes us better than everyone else? What makes you better than the children
I am not.
dying in Darfur?
No, I am not.
Why are
I am not
suffering
better.
and not you?
Well, no, I'm not better at all. I deserve no better treatment at all. And all I'm left with is this humble acquiescence that I should be suffering. And that if I don't do something about them, then I'm despicable. And that's the reality. I believe it raises the level of my moral obligation to others.
What's the difference in you not getting the punishment you say you deserve versus the children that are actually getting the punishment that you say they deserve because they were born sinners?
Well, I mean, now you're saying, why does God do one thing here and a different thing there? And I don't know the mind of God. How am I supposed to answer that question? But I can say this. This is not just a Christian answer, this is also a Buddhist answer. The whole point of that is to say to me, I can't just sit by and pretend like it's not happening. I have to do something to make a difference in that other person's life, or I'm immoral.
All right, next question.
Okay, if God is almighty, all-knowing, omniscient, omnipresent, knows the beginning to the end, why do people pray believing that they think that it will make a difference?
Yeah, this is the Jonathan Edwards kind of point too, that if God has foreknowledge, how can things be free at all? How can things change? It's based on the presumption. I mean, the old answer is Anselm's, not Anselm, I'm sorry, the name's not coming to mind right now. The old answer is God sees it, but he doesn't have to determine it kind of thing. But I don't find that answer helpful. Our presumption, not just yours, our presumption about God's knowledge is what makes that question tricky. We presume that God comes to know things the way we come to know them, either through rational implication, relations of ideas, or by experience. Well, it happened, now I know it. We don't believe that about God. God's omnipotence, God's omniscience, are just because he's God, not because he's coming to learn things. And if that's the case, there's no incompatibility between God knowing something and God changing it. It doesn't mean he's surprised by it.
No, but if ultimately God's will be done, regardless of what we ask for, what's the point of prayer?
Again, your question is not exactly the same as his. You get the answer to yours, right?
Well, kind of, sort of, but I'm saying...
Well, it's very simple. God can know that he responded to our prayer. There's no difficulty.
Okay, but if he already knows everything, why do people pray?
Why ask for something if the end is still...
I didn't have to pray. So this is the whole point of the statement. I could have prayed, I could not have prayed. Either way, God would know what the result is going to be. Knowing it and determining it are two different things.
So what's the point in prayer? If the same thing is going to happen regardless, why pray at all?
But that's not what I said. I didn't say the same thing is going to happen regardless. The fact that God knows it doesn't mean it's determined by God. So there's a simple model of this in, I'm sure you've heard of Alvin Plantinga and guys like this, right? So they make this argument. It's fairly straightforward, but it's a complex argument because it's a complex issue.
It is, and plus, a lot of, maybe his personality is just retools from Spanish Sunday comics, so a lot of the humor gets lost in the translation.
All right, next question.
I spent the better part of the last hour coming up with a great theological argument, but then that was dashed by your comments on science. What I'm wondering is, are you equivocating on the term faith or trust? Because it's not faith to believe that water freezes at 0 degrees Celsius. It's confirmed observation. Sorry. So what are you saying exactly about how observations are made in science?
Well, actually, that example is an easy case of this. What David Hume, the skeptic, right, points out is that, and this is why I always say I'm more skeptical than David Smalley is. What David Hume points out is that is an observation based on your faith that things in the future are going to continue to be like they were in the past. Inductive reasoning is based on a step of faith. David Hume is a skeptic of all knowledge. He doesn't believe we have any knowledge at all. And that's his case against inductive knowledge. So your belief that water will freeze at a certain temperature, no matter what, is different from the observation that water froze yesterday. It's different. So it's an act of faith on your part. I have faith in a lot of that. I have faith that the natural world will continue to be similar to what it is right now, which is why I believe the roof's not going to fall in on me and I can walk on the carpet and I'm not going to fall through to hell and things like that. But it is faith still. I'm still having to act on faith, that's all. I mean, it's David Hume's point, it's not even my point. So.
I think the water freezing is a statement of known results.
Again, the statement about known results is not the same as a statement about what's going to happen tomorrow. I'm not saying it's false. I'm just saying it's still based on an inductive leap. You have to say, because the universe has always been this way, it will be that way tomorrow. It's a reasonable deduction, but it's still based on the faith that things will continue to be in the future as they were yesterday. And there is no justification for that claim. There is no justification for it. Nothing that's not question-begging. That's what David Hume proves. Again, it's an inquiry concerning human understanding. I think it's section 4. There are 2 parts to that section, and it's in the second part of that section. Yeah.
All right. Please be back in your seats by 7:30. We're going to give our participants a break. This is the second part of our 2-part debate. Now we're going to be talking about whether gay marriage should be legal or not in America. This time, Mr. David Smalley will be the affirmative, and Dr. Barry Creamer will be the negative. We're going to compress this one a little shorter than the previous one, but there will still be ample opportunity to ask questions after the debate ends. Just a brief reminder, please check your cell phones, please. There was a couple stray rings in the last debates. And please, let's give a round of applause for our gracious host, the secular students at Collin College. It's really hard to get this the debate itself is free, but a $5 suggested donation is always welcome. And if you're interested in joining the club, if you're a student here at Collin or you just live close to here, talk to that guy in the back, Patrick Smith. He's the president and a really good friend of mine. So without further ado, let's get debating again. So, Mr. Smalley, come on up.
Everybody's thinking, oh no, he brought the Bible with him. Yes, I did. This is such an important topic. It's very important, especially because of the upcoming election. I think everybody here is very clear on where both parties stand on marriage equality. So, because my opponent is Christian, I know he turns to the book of the Holy Bible for not only guidance, but also not necessarily just strict rules, but also just generic good ways to live, good ways to treat other people, good ways to interact and think about certain things. So I'm actually going to read a little bit from the Bible today to talk about why gay marriage should be legal. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the parable in Matthew 20, but it's called the parable of the workers in the vineyard. Now, basically, and I'm going to do some paraphrasing as I go, and he'll obviously have an opportunity to refute anything that I get wrong. But Matthew 20 is basically about an owner of a vineyard who needs workers. It says, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. Now when he agreed with them, the laborers, for 1 coin for all day of labor." So basically he goes out, finds a laborer for 1 day, and agrees to pay them a coin, and they agree to work for that coin for the entire day. Later, at about the 3rd hour, he went out and saw others standing in the marketplace, and he said to them, "You also go to the vineyard, and I'll pay you what is right." Some verses say, or some translations say fair. Again he went out by the 6th hour and the 9th hour, and did likewise. And about the 11th hour he went out and found others standing idle, and said to them, "Why are you standing around?" And they said, "Because no one's hired us." So he said, "Come to the vineyard and I'll pay you what is fair." So we've got people that started all day, 3rd hour, 6th hour, 9th hour, and then people that just began working in the 11th hour. When the evening come, the owner went to the vineyard steward, and some say the foreman. And he said, call the laborers and give them their wages, beginning with the last that we hired, and pay them until you get to the first ones we hired. When those came that were hired last, who had only began work in the 11th hour, the owner paid them 1 coin. So naturally, when the people who had been working all day came for their pay, they said, no, I need some more cash because you paid those guys 1 coin and they only worked for an hour. We worked all day. Now, subjectively, we may agree with that concept, but he says to them, he answered one of them, friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree to work for me all day for this 1 coin? Take what is yours and go. Now, in today's standards, that makes... Okay, look at it like this. In today's standards, if you saw that happen, you wouldn't be happy about it. But really, what leg would you have to stand on to say, I deserve more money for working? You agreed at the beginning of the day to work for that wage, and you only changed your opinion of your own value when you saw that someone else had something better. The purpose of the parable, in my opinion, and that's the way parables must be interpreted, is my opinion, is when you make an agreement or you have something of value, someone else having something of value can't devalue what you have because you determine your own value. Your value isn't set by others. The purpose of me bringing the parable of Matthew 20 up in this debate is Christians who are married, your marriage is perfectly valuable at what you value your marriage to be. People getting married of the same gender should not devalue your marriage, nor should you even worry about what they're doing. Your own marriage is set by your own value, however strong you may feel about that. But these 2 other people that get married, now they're married too. Now they have the same title. How does that devalue anything that you have? Matthew 20 says it doesn't. And if you're going to be consistent and you're going to read from the Bible, from parables on how to interact with people, you've got to take that parable to understand that what you have is yours and what other people have is theirs. And you can't base your value of your life or your marriage on someone else's version of marriage. It was never made illegal, completely illegal, for gays to be married, in Texas anyway, until 2005. It was actually put into law. So if you want to be traditional, if you want to be historical, you should have left it alone. But is it about being traditional? Or is it about pushing an agenda and taking rights away from people that don't agree with your worldview? The bottom line is, anytime in our nation's history, when you're moving toward taking rights away from citizens of this country, every time you lose. Thank you.
So the terms that we need to talk about are marriage and rights and toleration. I thought you were going to go down the equality road with the parable that you were doing, and we can talk about that later if we need to as well. The trick on this issue is that people don't get what rights are. So that's the main thing I want to talk to you about. To get there, let me do the first 2. Marriage. Not the Princess Bride. Marriage. That's what I'm tempted to say. Look, people live together. That's not marriage. not what it is. Anybody can live together, they do it now. Anybody can go live with whoever they want to live with. That's not the same thing as marriage. People share a house, it's not marriage. They share a car, it's not marriage. They share an agreement for what they're going to do with their lives, that's not marriage. It's living together, it's whatever you want it to be, but it's not marriage. Buddies can live together. You know, lovers can live together. Non-lovers can live together. Living together is not marriage. Having sex with each other is not marriage. It's not what it is. So what on earth is it? Well, it's this contractual thing. You can make all the contracts you want. It's not marriage. So you can do powers of attorney and have whoever you want represent you in any circumstance. When I am incapacitated, this is the person who already has power of attorney. They can step in at any moment and make decisions on my behalf to represent me. See, there are all kinds of contractual ways to do all that shared resources stuff. Now, the tax code rewards marriage and in other ways punishes marriage at different times depending on who the tax code's coming from, but we all agree it's all messed up anyway. You know, it'd be different or whatever. But that's not what marriage is. So, exactly what is marriage? Well, it's very simple. It is a social sanction on a relationship. Sanctions used in two different ways. One is approbation, one is reprobation. This is approval of this relationship. It's society saying, it's a social statement. This is why you go get a marriage license. This is why you have an officiant at the marriage. So if it's a justice of the peace or a pastor, and that's not even a biblical practice. It's not like in the scriptures, in the New Testament, you find churches doing weddings. It's a social thing. We just happen to have instantiated that in our culture into the practice of churches. But it is a social practice. It's not about the two people being together. It's about society saying, we have put them together. And that's why you have an obligation that's built into it. It used to be such an obligation that you had to have some pretty substantial evidence if you wanted to go and break that obligation with that person, get a divorce. So we've sort of changed it since then. So keep that in mind when we say we want same-sex marriage. We're not saying we just want homosexuality to be okay. That's not what this issue is. It's same-sex marriage. That's the question. It's not just can people exchange contracts, and that's not even what the homosexual community wants, right? I mean, the whole thing is we don't want some legally defined status that's not marriage but is all of the things that marriage entails. We don't want that. We want marriage. Why is that? Because marriage is a social sanctioning. It's a thing that says we approve of this relationship, we therefore establish this relationship, and that's why the couple make a promise, not just to each other, but to these witnesses. You know, that's the nature of it. That's what it's been historically. So if you have that in mind, then the question of whether someone has a right to marriage changes completely. But we're so perverted in our sense of what a right is. We are so turned about in our understanding of what the word right means that it's not even. I don't even know how to bridge broach the topic without having to clarify it. So, you know, because we say I have a right to health care, I have a right to a taco, I have a right to go to the movies, I have a right to all these things that you don't have a right to. They don't make any sense philosophically. A right has to be this negative thing, meaning when we say at the beginning of our existence, you have a right to life, liberty, and property. It doesn't mean you have a right to life. Right to life? What would that even mean? You get cancer or your arm cut off in such a way that you're going to bleed to death, and you say, my rights are being violated. People die. This is what happens. A right to life is the right to, it's actually a prevention, a negative, but it's the right not to have someone else take that life from you. That's the whole point. That's why we call them negative rights. Right to property isn't a right for you to own property. It's a right for you to keep the property that's yours, meaning no one else can just take it from you. That's what the right to property is about. It's right, life, liberty, and property. Right to autonomy isn't the right to float or levitate. It's the right not to make your own decisions, not to have someone else imposing their will on you. instead. It's a right to life, liberty, and property. The reason they are that is because the whole nature of rights is that everyone has them together. Everyone has the same rights. By definition, that's what they are. They're the thing everyone has. So, by definition, you can only have negative rights because if I say you have a right to life and it means you get to live, it's inherently violated. If I say you have a right to property and it means you have a right to a Coca-Cola, then where we run out of Coca-Cola, somebody's going to be in conflict with you. So we make rights negative instead of positive because positive rights inherently create a conflict of rights, a conflict in the society. So rights are negative. Meaning marriage can't be a right, because if you have a right to marriage, of any kind, a right to marriage, then you have a right to force someone to marry you. You don't have that. You have a right not to be prevented from marriage by someone else. That's fair enough. You say, well, that's all we want. We just want the right to go and get married. But marriage isn't something you're doing yourself. Marriage is what the society does. Marriage is a social sanctioning. So the third word, toleration, comes in right here. You are not saying to me, when you say, you have to allow us to have same-sex marriage, you're not saying to me, you have to be more tolerant. You're saying to me, I am not allowed to express with the other people in my society who believe that marriage should be between a man and a woman. You are saying, I have to give up that belief and give my sanctioning social approval to your relationship, even if I don't agree with it. That's why I don't believe it ought to be given. It's not a right to begin with.
You said that marriage is strictly social.
Not strictly social, but it is a social sanctioning, yeah.
If there's a selection of marriage that is social, there are many people here that wouldn't care if society thought they should be married or not. A lot of people, including me, I don't think 18-year-olds should get married. I think it's silly. But I think they should legally be able to. I think the general consensus is, if you were to walk around with microphones and say, do you think a 19-year-old should get married? Would you tell your 19-year-old son or daughter to get married? I think the general sociological consensus is that that would be too young to get married, even though they legally can.
I got married at 20.
There are some people 40, 50 years ago that thought interracial marriage should be illegal. There were a large number of people that thought that shouldn't happen.
Sure.
So there may be one specific social aspect of marriage, but I think it's a very small aspect. I think marriage comes with legal rights. And when you said that living together, being in love is not marriage, sharing property is not marriage, staying together and purchasing things together is not marriage, all the things that you say are not marriage, the state of Texas disagrees. Because there is such a thing as common law, and if you are together long enough and you present yourself as a couple and you share property, you may have to get divorced by the state of Texas, even though you never actually got married. As far as the power of attorney goes, it's right. But telling, and I'm sure we'll get into this, I'm not sure if you agree with civil unions or not for same-sex couples, but saying, well, you can get similar to the rights, you can go get a power of attorney, you just can't be married. To me, that's a lot like saying, you can get on the bus, you just can't sit here. And I think it's on the wrong side of history. I think it's taking rights away from people that they already did have it, and I actually believe it is a right. And I don't think that marriage is purely social. I think that largely it's legal, and I think people who are of the same sex should have the same rights to get married and make bad decisions that we all have the ability to do. And telling them that they have to do it under a different title, or under a civil union, or under a power of attorney, to me, is ultimately discrimination.
Your response?
Okay, number one is, I have not at all said that the only things involved in marriage are social. That's not the case. It is the case that When you are married, you share your property. When you are married, you share a sexual relationship. When you are married, you live together. All those things follow from marriage. I said those things don't make marriage what it is. So saying you share property does not mean you are married. So it's the opposite implication. You can't just reverse it. So you're correct. There is more to marriage than just the social. But it is the social sanctioning that is essential to the nature of marriage. It's what makes it marriage instead of just living together or anything else. And that's why we're already in agreement about civil unions. I think that's a silly answer. I think it's a pretense. We want to do it because we feel guilty, and so we don't want the name marriage somehow tainted, so we're going to do it. I'm with you completely on civil unions. It's not a good answer. I do not agree with that at all. So, but for different reasons. You want to go the whole way, and I don't want to go any other way. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. You're right. That's hypocritical. I find it a bad answer, so thank you. Your statement, I don't think 19-year-olds should get married. Well, I don't get to pick either. I mean, the society picks. So if you have a Prop 8 in California, or you have a state that defines marriage a certain way, and, the statement, we passed a law 6 years ago, so if you want to defend tradition, just leave it alone. Laws are passed when things come to be an issue. They're not passed when there's no issue. So there's no point. The tradition is in the fact that there wasn't a law. The fact that the law was so easily passed after that is evidence that the tradition was being threatened or challenged in a way that's not comfortable for people. So that's why that happens. But I don't get to pick myself. I'm not society. I am one part of the society. So I don't get to say, I don't believe in marriage because I don't believe in marriage. So let me jump to your example, because you've done this repeatedly, this time with interracial marriage. Of course, there are certain rejections or restrictions that are wrong, and those ought to be removed. I don't think every restriction is right. I think this restriction is right. Do I think a restriction on interracial marriage is right? Of course not. That's absurd. I'm not, and in fact, there are a lot of people who are very offended at the equivalence that tries to rise in the nature of saying homosexuality, same-sex marriage, is equivalent to the civil rights movement of the 60s. There are a lot of people who are offended by that because they disagree with same-sex marriage, but they themselves are beneficiaries of the civil rights movement. And they are different things. They can be different things. Now, whether they are or not, we can argue about. But on the moral basis, they are different things. If there's not a moral difference, if homosexuality is not a moral issue, then obviously you're going to argue the other way. But for people who believe homosexuality is wrong, it's just nonsensical to compare that with something that has no moral, constituency to it. Okay, so with that said, one last comment.
Can I say something about that really quick? My point there was that there was a time where the general consensus in society was that interracial marriages should not take place. My point is, even at that time, even though the society thought that was the case, it was still wrong.
So let me be more direct in my response. The idea that because in some ways we are wrong and learn about that and make changes, then every change that's proposed ought to be adopted is nonsensical.
No.
Some changes are good, some changes are bad. That's all I'm trying to say. Not the same thing.
All right, we're going to go into the... I'm going to mix this up a little bit. David, is marriage a right or a privilege?
I had them in order.
Okay. All right.
I'll do it. You're the moderator.
Feels a little better.
I think that this is... I completely disagree when you say marriage is not a right. I think
for anyone. I'm saying for me either. For anyone. It's just not... The word is incorrect. The word rights shouldn't be applied. That's what I'm trying to get across.
Well, whenever you say that our rights are endowed by our Creator, what do you mean by that?
Well, again,
you said a right
same thing the authors meant, which is, John Locke originally and then Thomas Jefferson. The idea of rights in their minds, the same thing Edmund Burke talks about, which a lot of libertarians in this room know. And that is that they're inherently negative and never positive, so I don't have a right to a hot dog. When I think of myself having a right to a hot dog, what I could mean in some legitimate way might be, if anybody else can go get a hot dog and all they have to do is pay this amount of money or show up at this place, then I shouldn't be prevented from it just because I'm human or different.
We agree.
But that's the point. My autonomy is a right that I have. not the hot dog. So I can't just walk up and take someone else's hot dog. I don't have a right to a hot dog. I have a right to autonomy. That's fine. But my autonomy doesn't extend to being able to do things that violate everyone else's autonomy. And I think we're in agreement about that. We're just in disagreement about how it manifests itself on this issue. Right?
I believe so, which I think is interesting because the whole argument of abortion would go against what you just said.
No. I'm adamantly pro-life with exactly what I'm saying. Yeah.
But then that would give the government the right to
protect one life from another person.
Protect one life, yet make laws concerning someone's bodily autonomy.
Yeah, of course. It's just like no. It's just like no. This is the whole nature of the rights. So if I say I have a right to life, or people have a right to life, then if someone kills someone, then that's why I'm in favor of the death penalty. If someone kills someone, then they forfeit their life. That's the whole point of it. Because rights are preserved in a society where you say you can't violate someone else's prerogative.
Okay, so you think that marriage is a privilege? Deemed by society, as long as you have...
I'm not even saying privilege. I think privilege still puts it on the individual and misses the point that it's a social act. That the social act is what makes marriage what it is.
So whatever society decides, that's marriage?
By definition. Which is why we kept Utah out of the Union until they agreed with our social definition of what would be and wouldn't be marriage. My question would be, are you in favor of polygamy? Do you believe polygamy ought to be legal in the country? And I'm assuming you'll say yes. I mean, that would be not irrational.
I haven't made up my mind about that. I think it's wrong. I think it's wrong to the women, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, my assumption is we change this law and then polygamy changes in 5 years.
No,
8 years.
I mean, if you know, on one hand, I'm honestly
pressure is there.
I'm going to answer you though.
Okay.
On one hand, I'm really torn about it because on one hand, I want to say if consenting adults want to join into that and make up their mind, they have the decision to. On the other hand, I disagree with the concept, and I feel like it's that most of the women who are forced into that, usually because of religion, let's not forget, usually are forced into that, end up on the raw end of the deal. So I'm
not my religion.
My position is evolving on that one. As Obama said.
Yeah, well, this would be exactly my point, though. I mean, society does have. Look, if a guy moves into an apartment with 5 women, what is there? There's no law to say you can't do that.
Right.
And I won't go beyond that.
Well, there's a government aspect, there's a welfare aspect of it, there's a financial thing behind it.
But the point is,
women are collecting checks.
We recognize that even though they can do that in their behavior, they don't have a right to demand from society that we sanction it, that we say, we approve of this, because that's what marriage is. It's society saying,
but I think
we
it's
approve
unfair.
of this.
I think it's unfair, Dr. Kramer, to equate one man having 9 wives from 2 people that love each other, that want to get married and share equal property, that just happen to have the same gender.
And I'm not trying to equate that. You're right, I'm not trying to equate that. I'm simply trying to make the point that we do recognize that society sets boundaries on marriage, and therefore, marriage to anyone, anywhere, anytime is not the case in our society. We say there are some things that are marriage and there are some things that are not, which means you can't say whoever wants to get married anywhere, anytime, they have a right to it. That's not the case. So the disagreement is about where the line should be drawn. Who can get married and who can't get married? And the question is, how do you draw that line? Well, I'd love to draw the line for everybody. I'll just open the Bible and I'll prove to them this is the case. But I don't believe in a theocracy. I believe in a democracy. Okay. And so I believe it's a social definition of that boundary. And that's the only reason. Is when the society votes for it, I'm not going to be able to say anything about it. I'm going to be able to say things about it personally, but I'm not going to be able to say anything about it in the society. But when the society is standing against it, to demand that we say it is to be intolerant of those who hold the view that homosexuality should not be endorsed as the means by which we want to promote family living or whatever it is.
So for you, this isn't really about the concept of homosexuality. No. It's about the sociological acceptance of the term marriage.
Not just the term marriage, but yes, of marriage and the social understanding of where same-sex relationships
So for people that want to get married because of the legal benefits or the medical benefits or the benefits of being able to make decisions upon their partner's behalf when they're in the hospital or something.
All of that, in my opinion, is a smokescreen.
None of that
I don't mean it's not sincerely designed.
I guess what I'm trying to say is none of that matters to you as long as society doesn't accept those 2 people having a marriage. You don't care that they want all of those things.
Well, actually, that's backwards of what's true for me. If that's all that a same-sex couple wants, then they just get that piecemeal. You know, just go get it piecemeal. That's not it. They want that very important. I mean, it is. I think this is true. I mean, same-sex couples are making a fair complaint when they say, but we don't get to have this status of marriage associated with it because that's the most important relationship in life, and you're telling me I can't have it. I think that's a fair interpretation on their part. But it's not an interpretation about sharing property or contractual rights or the ability to visit in the hospital or make a decision for them, because you can do all that through other legal means. They want all of that, and I understand why, because I want it in marriage. They want all of that to be tied to this sexually intimate, socially approved relationship that we call marriage.
I interviewed, I was out in New Mexico, and I interviewed a gay Christian for my show, because I find that concept in itself to be very intriguing. And during pieces of the recording, I stopped at one point because he got a phone call. And he's on the phone, he's talking to the guys about coming to his apartment for some sort of repair, a cable repair or electricity or something. And he says, "Don't worry, my roommate will be home." And he's been with this man for 17 years and still has to use terms like, "my roommate will be home."
Mm-hmm.
And I literally felt nauseous when I heard that. I hurt for him because I want him to not be ashamed of who he is in love with. And although I happen to be straight, I can imagine what it would be like to live in a society where I'm not allowed to say, "my wife will be there." I have to pretend she is something else so that I don't get made fun of when the phone call is over.
Yeah,
and that's really what this is about.
I'm not celebrating the pain either. I am not celebrating the pain.
I think ultimately he has a right to be able to use the same language anybody else does that's in love.
Not from the language. Not from the language. I mean, that's in truth self-contradictory, because the language is a demand that society say it's okay. So what we're doing is we're saying, I want the approval of a group whose definition and status of approval I want to mandate to be changed. The society says, this is what we sanction, and this is why we use this vocabulary, and it's because we value heterosexual couples as families. That's why. Good, bad, or indifferent. I think it's good, by the way. But good, bad, or indifferent, that's what the society is saying. And the same-sex couple are saying, I understand why. Emotionally and psychologically, I get it. It's painful. They are saying, we want to be able to use the vocabulary that says you have approved of us, when they haven't. The society hasn't approved of them.
Now, before time is up, let me just say this final thing. I think it's not that we demand you to be supportive of something that we think is all right. It's really that we know that all of the oppression really stems from religious belief and religious doctrine. And what we're saying is, don't let religious doctrine overrule the Constitution, which left it legal in the first place.
Does the rest of the society have the freedom to express their conscience or not? And if they do, what difference does it make to you whether it came from their religion or their atheism? What difference would it make? They're expressing their values, and you're saying they're not allowed to express that value.
They're allowed to express it.
Okay, as a society, here's the expression of our value. We do not sanction same-sex relationships. Do I believe we should go on a hunt to find people? Absolutely not. Do I believe we should persecute people? Absolutely not. I don't believe any of that.
Many societies have.
Believe me, I know that. I'm not condoning any of that. I am saying to say that this majority of society are not allowed to express their conviction that marriage should be heterosexual.
No, they are allowed to express it. I would never say someone doesn't have the
freedom
to express it.
That's the point of saying, then that's what marriage is for. Marriage is society saying, that's why we approve of this.
Expressing your opinion on something and putting millions of dollars into taking rights are two different things.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Creamer, how does gay marriage hurt traditional marriage?
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with the implication of that question for me. I don't think it threatens, the relationships that married couples have. But in society, it threatens the institution of marriage, the nature of what marriage is in that society, by definition, because that's why we use the word. We use the word marriage to say, this is the kind of relationship we want to promote for couples in our society, for families in our society. And so it's not to me that it's a threat to traditional relationships. It is to me a threat to the institution that we believe provides a moral basis for our society. So, when people, all of this science stuff, and I'm not a scientist. I don't do that stuff. It's beyond me, and I am respectful of the work that they do. But Mark Regnerus, I have no idea how to say that man's name, in Austin, has just been brutalized over a legitimate sociological study that people who disagree with it have acknowledged is the best research that's been done. It's not sufficient. There needs to be more research. But he came to a conclusion that adult children of heterosexual relationships had some psychological stability or advantage over adult children of same-sex relationships, blah, blah, blah. It was just all he did was just report the findings, and he was brutalized because of the agenda, which is largely in his field. His PhD is in sociology. That's where he works at UT, Austin, and where he wrote this report and had it published in whatever it is, Sociology, I think is the name of the journal itself. And he was brutalized for it because he just reported that it might be the case that heterosexual couples produce healthier relationships long term. Now, I don't know that that's going to prove to be true or not. I really don't know.
We've got a topic for gay parents adopting. And so
we'll handle that then.
Yeah, we'll do that
that's good.
But as far as it hurting traditional marriage,
or the institution of traditional marriage.
My point is to say the society has a right, and I'm using that word loosely now, but society has this prerogative, I guess is the word I should use, of defining the things that are in its interest. And it, for now, defines in its interest heterosexual marriage as the institution that ought to be foundational to our family structures. And only because broadening the definition does not allow the society to say that with this word anymore. I believe it hurts the nature of what traditional marriage as a term means in our society.
You seem to be purposefully avoiding the God reasoning or the biblical basis behind.
Because I don't believe in dictating to people from theocracy. It's not a theocracy. I can't stand up and say the Bible says it, therefore you got to do it.
So are you telling
democratic society.
Are you telling me that because you've stated that, because you've said it's a sociological developing issue, that once 51% of the country's population
then the country
ultimately agrees on gay marriage, you're telling me that you will then say you do believe gay marriage should be legal because society voted that way? And
that it's still wrong. Yes, I'll say
what?
Both. I'll say both. Not everything that's wrong is illegal.
It's still...
Yeah, I believe in the rule of law. There are laws that I believe are immoral, but they're still the law. I pay my taxes, even though I believe the tax code's immoral. But I still pay my taxes. So I'm going to respect the laws of the land, and the laws of the land are what they are. It's not like I can just set up my own little constitutional monarchy.
So you don't... Okay.
I am not, as an individual, the whole of society. So I can't define, in the future, marriage for myself. But I can say, I think this society is wrong. I can say that, even when they're making it legal. And I think they will. Eventually, I think
so then once it's made illegal, let's talk about why you
think
it's...
Made legal.
Right. What did I say?
Illegal, I think.
Oh, once it's made legal, why would you still think it's wrong? Let's talk about that.
Because man doesn't make what's right and wrong. This is a part of the fundamental divide between you and me. My belief about why homosexual marriage is wrong does entail that I believe homosexuality is wrong, obviously. That's why I think same-sex relationships are the ones that ought to define marriage. I believe all of that based on my relationship with God. But when I'm establishing public policy, I don't have the prerogative of just dictating to people my personal values.
Well, you do in the form of
Only if there's a majority who are with me.
In the form of voting.
And we've all got the option to get out there and convince as many people as we can. And I've got to live with the laws that get by through you, just like you've got to live with the laws that get by through me, which means we try to do it. But at the end of the day, we're going to find it more and more difficult to do that because we have more and more of a divide on basic values in our culture. It's becoming more and more difficult. Which is why, again, I appreciate this dialogue, because there are times when you and I have been able to say, well, look, I still don't disagree. I still don't agree, but I understand better where you're coming from.
And I'm glad you said that, because I do understand better where you're coming from here. It makes more sense to me.
Well, embarrassingly, I have to say I don't hear this a lot out in, public record.
No. I can say that that's an argument that most people don't use when they're talking about preventing gay marriage. They don't just say because society is against it. As a matter of fact, most of the people that are preaching against it are preaching against it because God's against it, because it's in the Bible. They never just say, well, when society deems it acceptable, I'll be fine with the fact that it's legal. So then my question will be for you, Dr. Creamer, when society does say, and I say when, not if, because it's
I know, it is coming down.
When society does accept gay marriage, are you going to feel that devalues or threatens your traditional marriage in any way?
Certainly, because traditional marriage is about society. And so, yeah, of course I'll believe society is being threatened by it.
But once society agrees, I'm saying once society agrees, gay marriage is okay.
Societies can agree on something that's wrong. So now, this is not related in any way. I'm not making a moral equivalence here. I'm making the point that societies can adopt a view that is wrong. Societies can do that. They did it in the 1930s, and they've done it at other times. That's a much different example. I'm not equating the two. I'm just saying people can do the wrong thing and all agree together to do it, but it still be wrong. That's all I'm saying. So
even divorce, for example, even divorce is legal, you think it's wrong.
Of course, exactly.
But you think it should be legal.
Well, actually, on that one, I not only should it be legal, like we tolerate it because society tolerates it, that one I think does have moral justification too. There's a reasonable sense. Divorce is in Scripture, basically, is what I'm saying.
Right. And as far like other biblical concepts such as premarital sex, you don't think those things should be outlawed, even though society may say.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you raising it that way, because this is another thing people get really confused about. The fact that I believe homosexuality is immoral, which I'm sure we'll come back to, doesn't mean that I think it has to be illegal. It doesn't mean I don't either, but it doesn't mean I have to think it's illegal. Just like lying, lying is immoral. Lying doesn't need to be illegal. There's no point in that.
I personally think that the celebrity 72-hour marriage is more of a threat to traditional marriage than same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
If anybody needs to put laws into something like that.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not. It's not an either or to me. They're both problems.
Shall we move on next? Should gay parents be allowed to adopt?
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, I'm very intrigued by that statement you made, and this is not just a display, let's go out and argue about this. I'm very interested in what you mentioned. What study was that?
Mark Regnerus. You just look up his name, you'll get a plethora of hits. He has been eviscerated over the past 3 or 4 months.
It's interesting.
Maybe longer, 6 months.
In my research, not only for my podcast, but also just for this debate and just in general reading, there was a recent study, and I'll actually email you, or I'll mention it on the show so someone knows. I'll go cite the study that I read about because I didn't cite it here.
Yeah.
But it was a group of authors that were writing a book, and it showed that children, specifically in lesbian homes, scored higher than kids in straight families on self-esteem, confidence, and were less likely to have behavior problems or aggression. And it may be, my position on that is that it's because they're being raised in a home that is threatened by society in general, and they're raised with compassion and tolerance. To say, yeah, people are going to string things at us, and we have to process that and realize that has no real effect on our value. And these kids are being raised with ultimate values of respect and dignity. because they're ultimately, I think, victims of a society that's behind in history.
I mean, it's a nice thought. There's just no evidence that that's why it is or what it is. And if you'll go look at this Regnerus thing, which is not, again, it's not going to be definitive either. I don't know that his study is going to stand up in 5 years or 8 years. There's an inherent problem with his study as well that I can mention in a minute. But all of these studies are, unfortunately, agenda-driven. So, and sociology, and I'm not trying to be insulting if there are sociology PhDs here, it's just a reality. Sociology has a real reputation as an aggressively social engineering, basically, leftist type of discipline. And it's a very, it's a discipline that leans in that direction. And the reality that scientists, including sociologists, allow their agenda to shape their study, the selection of the material and the topics and what they want to find and what they do find, is just built into it, which also means, I'm agreeing with you on this part, that Regnerus' study is probably unjust also. I mean, inherently, you're doing a study on same-sex, on the impact of same-sex parenting and heterosexual parenting from the same time period with adult offspring, then you're doing it in a setting where it's not a sanctioned relationship. So obviously there's a problem built into it. But you start with what you have.
Another one.
But his study is the one that is respected as having the best blend of data.
I'll definitely look it up. Not that it's going to change my opinion.
No, I
I'm
would.
interested in the data. But
it wouldn't change my opinion either.
One thing I have noticed about some of these studies that come out, because I have read several, that will say that children of homosexual households or homosexual parents have some sort of issues or behavior problems. What they fail to tell you in a lot of the studies that I've been digging in, many of their participants were actually products, the children were actually products of a straight marriage that resulted in divorce, and then the mother later came out as a lesbian and got with another woman. And they were part of the study as well. So the child also is a product of divorce.
Yeah, I'm not going to disagree with you.
Other trauma. So
I'm not going to disagree with you on any of that. None of that's my reasoning. My reasoning is the same as the civil unions thing. I don't think any steps in that direction are appropriate. So do you think, despite
that study, to answer the question, obviously I think that gay parents should be allowed to adopt or gay couples. Why do you think, other than that one study that you admit may be flawed, or at least...
No, I'm not. That study is not my reasoning.
So what is your reasoning for not letting...
The same reason I oppose civil unions. I don't want any steps taken in the direction of sanctioning same-sex marriage, that idea. So just like singles adopt people, you evaluate based on the individual, all that kind of stuff, and that happens. The same way in those kinds of relationships. If you have a same-sex relationship and the couple adopts, you are inherently saying, you are implicitly saying, I should say, this is a relationship that's proto-marriage, if not marriage itself.
So do you
I just think it's deceptive.
So do you think single parents...
One way or the other. Not on the part of the couple, I'm saying on the part of society.
Should single adults be allowed to adopt?
Yeah, look, my option is always going to be for a heterosexual couple to adopt first. But of course, then there are other options too, where singles do adopt.
So if they're...
I don't think it's the best option.
Then do you agree that a single who would be a great parent, happens to be homosexual, but is not with anyone, should he or she be allowed to adopt?
Yeah, it's a completely different question, and probably so. I'm not going to...
So one homosexual can adopt, just not two?
Right, because again, the issue is marriage. The issue is marriage. If I'm saying to you, what sense would it make for me to say, yes, I want this couple who do not have a sanctioned public relationship to be able to adopt this one child? What does that mean?
That's why I didn't understand why you said a single adult should be able to adopt. If truly what you're protecting...
No, because a single adult is tied to the child himself. That's it, or herself.
Yeah, but that person may find someone.
It's a simple relationship. The relationship that's established by the adoption of a single child is a relationship that mimics marriage. So society, in my opinion, in that state, is being hypocritical, saying, well, we're going to treat you as if you're married because we know it's coming down the road maybe, but we're not going to approve the marriage. If you're going to do it, do it. If you're not going to do it, don't do it. That's all I'm saying to you. So, but I'm in favor of not doing it. I'm not trying to leave it neutral.
Any more on this topic? Okay. And I'm going to switch up the notes a little bit, but Dr. Creamer, is being gay a choice?
I get to answer the question.
And of course, David can chime in. But...
Yeah, feel free to chime in whenever you want. My answer is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to me whether it's a choice or not. And even the term choice, again, I'm not creating an equivalence between these two things. So I'm going to use an example that I do not believe is related to homosexuality, okay? Is addiction a choice? So I say I've got an addiction to chocolate candies. Is that a choice? I could be born with some genetic predisposition to be addicted to chocolate candies. I could be born with a behavior that inherently manifests itself as, the consumption of chocolate candies. Or I could have chosen as a kid to eat so much chocolate candy that I just fell in love with it and I can't resist it anymore. I don't know. But if there's a point at which I say, well, you shouldn't be eating chocolate candy, then that becomes the question. Now, somebody might not be able to stop it, at that point, because they're addicted to it. They just can't stop it. So when you say, is it a choice, I don't know what you mean by that. Does that mean, was there a point at which a person did something to develop the desire for a homosexual relationship? I doubt it, and I don't know. I don't know. It doesn't make any difference to me. So if you ask me the question, though, does society need to approve that relationship? Then the answer of whether it came from a choice or from a genetic predisposition or from a certain psychological moment in upbringing or by pure free will doesn't change the issue at all. So my answer to the question is I don't know, and I'm not sure I care whether it's
actually I disagree. Surprisingly, it's a pretty big part of the problem, because nowhere else in society are we allowed to discriminate against people for something that they had no control over.
False. That's false entirely.
Tell me how it's false.
Pedophiles say exactly the same thing. I'm not equating the two things. I'm not equating the two behaviors. They're not the same thing. That is false, because there are plenty of people who say, I cannot help it that I love children. I cannot change that. That's who I am.
But
and I agree. They're not morally equivalent. I'm not saying they're morally equivalent.
In pedophilia, someone is being hurt against
I agree. It's wrong, and you agree it's wrong, and I agree that it's not morally equivalent to homosexuality. That's not the question. You said there is no other condition where we keep people from doing what comes naturally to them.
That's not what I said.
Well, something like that. Whatever. What was it you said? No, say it your way.
I said
it's a fair point.
That there's no other, that we don't, I don't even remember what I said. Play back the video so I can...
I think what you said was, in no other way do we discriminate based on something
things that we have no control over.
Yeah.
Right, so there are always...
So that guy says he has no control over it, and we do discriminate against him because of it. That was my point.
It's like I have no control over
but because
breaking into houses. I'm just a klepto. I have to do it. Well, if you're harming someone else, or you're taking property, or you're harming children, society will stop you, but gay marriage is not even close to that.
Okay, now you chose an example where you don't believe there's a deterministic force that brought the person to that condition. I chose an example where people do say there's a deterministic force that brought the person to that condition. And we do discriminate against that person. Discrimination is an abusive term because it is automatically associated with civil rights and racial discrimination. That's how the word is used now. I mean by this statement, we're discriminating against that pedophile by simply saying we make a difference with him. We say that behavior is not acceptable. Again, I don't believe those two behaviors are equivalent. I'm not saying they're morally equivalent, but I am saying because I'm willing to say this moral statement about this behavior, which may have been determined in that person for all I know. They may have no control over it whatsoever. I'm still willing to restrict it. So our disagreement is going to end up being about the morality of same-sex relationships.
I suppose so, because ultimately, I guess what I'm hearing though is if it is not a choice, and I know that some people are bisexual and have the ability to go both ways, and that I don't understand. I want more research on it. But for the majority of people who are of one sexual orientation or the other, putting laws around who they can and can't marry, if it's not a choice, if they are truly born that way, we're telling them that the only type of marriage we will accept is one that they are uncomfortable with. So they must pretend or go through the motions that's acceptable by society to get the same benefits or social acceptance. They have to be in a monogamous relationship with a person of the opposite sex before we will stamp it as approved.
Again, I agree that the psychological and emotional trauma that are associated with it are grievous. I agree with all of that.
So you don't think society should be more progressive?
The idea that society has to approve of everything that people feel compelled to do is not, it's just a non-starter.
Look,
we don't do that.
I got a couple of
no matter how painful it is for the person.
I got a couple of facts here, not necessarily for your benefit, but for the benefit of the audience at least, around the American Psychological Association and the American Psychiatric Association, both have done studies, and biologically speaking, when one identical twin is gay, there's a 52% chance that the other is also gay. If one separate birth sibling is gay, there's only a 6% to 10% chance that another sibling will be gay. When identical twins share an amniotic sac, they nearly always have the same orientation, gay or straight. Ray Blanchard discovered accidentally that each time a woman gives birth to a son, the chance that the next boy will be gay increases by 30%. It's absolutely biological.
No, that's not true. I am, the study I'm familiar with, the Blanchard study I'm familiar with, I am also aware that that study doesn't take into account other causal effects, and that's one of the critiques of it historically. It's an old study. But but again, it doesn't change my view either way. But saying that proves it's absolutely biological.
So if you don't carry the way,
it's quizzical why the other 60% weren't the same.
If you don't carry the way, let's pretend that it is biological and they have no choice.
I will pretend.
So if they have no choice and they are born that way, assuming that's the case, you're just telling them, sorry, you got dealt a bad hand, you were born attracted to people that you can't marry? Too bad?
Yes.
You don't think we should do anything about that? We shouldn't correct that wrong?
Correct which wrong?
The wrong that's being, the rights that are being taken from them, saying that they can't get married because they were born a certain way.
It's not a right. This is the opening of the discussion. And I think, I've made that point as clearly as I can, so I don't know it has to be rehashed. It's not a right to begin with. Are there tragic things that happen in the world, and do people suffer as a result of it? Absolutely. Do I believe we should mitigate the suffering as much as possible? Absolutely. Do I believe we should sacrifice the basic values of society and democracy in order to do that? No. So that's why I won't overturn a democratic ruling. If it happens democratically, I'm not going to have some revolution against it. I think society expresses its direction in terms of that social sanction.
But you eat Chick-fil-A, don't you?
Actually, never. I would, though.
I certainly appreciate everybody sticking around for this debate. It's a very important one, like I said at the beginning. And I think the debate needs to happen more often. I had the opportunity to speak with Matt Dillahunty before this debate. We were talking about moral relativism and other nerdy things that we like to talk about. And he said that he was extremely happy that I was doing this debate mixed with the existence of the God of the Bible, because despite most of the rhetoric that you hear, that's ultimately where this comes from and that's where it's connected. And he said that he thinks this is actually the first debate in line with Atheism Plus. And I'm fine with that. I think it's absolutely something that needs to be addressed, and I think more people need to address it. Besides, rightwingwatch.com or some random preacher screaming out that we need to lock gays into a gate and, just throw food to them. That's the type of stuff that makes it onto television. And as you see, most Christians, I don't think, believe that way for 1 second. But the bottom line is, it is about marriage equality. And there's no reason we should ban couples that are in love from having decision-making ability when it comes to property or medical decisions simply because they share the same gender. Massachusetts, which became the first state to officially legalize gay marriage in 2004, had the lowest divorce rate in the country in 2008. The two aren't connected. If marriage was only about the ability to reproduce, infertile couples should be banned from getting married. That's not what it's about. My bottom line is gay marriage is protected by the Constitution's commitments to liberty and equality. That's what this country was built on. The U.S. Supreme Court declared in 1974's Cleveland Board of Education versus LaFleur the following: freedom of personal choice in matters of marriage and family life are one of the liberties protected by the Due Process Clause. In 2010, District Judge Vaughn Walker wrote, banning marriage is unconstitutional under both the due process and equal protection clauses. And if it's about God, well, then the church doesn't have to approve of it. But the day our Constitution is overturned based on the Bible, well, that's the day this ceases to be a free country. Thank you.
Hey, again, I want to thank David for inviting me to the debate and y'all's hospitality, and you've been really kind in listening to the things I've said, some of which I know are not necessarily right up your alley, and for some of you it is right up your alley. So either way, I appreciate the opportunity. I think where we find ourselves as a culture is, how long do I have for this?
5.
Okay, let me get there more quickly. Where we find ourselves as a culture is a product of our focus on individuals only. We have shrunk the world more and more to the point where we don't accept anyone outside of us as individuals telling us anything that we ought to do or have to do or what we ought to be. We're not comfortable with that. And I love the rise of individualism because of its promotion of freedom of conscience. That a person ought to make their own decision. They ought to choose faith in either object the way they want to. Whatever. I'm for all of that. So I love individualism for this. And the natural consequence of that individualism is that we have stopped recognizing the value of social institutions as social institutions. That's what they are to begin with. So the more individualistic we've become over time, and thank heavens for the protection of freedom of conscience that came with that, the less concerned we've been with the social aspect of what this relationship's about to begin with. To the point that we believe it is tolerant to say to the majority of people that you must approve this relationship even if it violates your own conscience, even if it violates your belief about what this established social sanction is supposed to be for. We want you to approve of it our way instead. Now, I understand the fear that what we're doing is ramming our religion down everyone else's throat. I understand the fear of that. That would be the case if I were saying to you, you must believe what I believe. You must do what I do. That would be the case. That's not this. This is you coming to me, not me personally, you coming to the society and saying, we want sanctioning for our relationship, and then demanding that that society provide it even though they don't sanction the relationship. Doesn't make sense to demand that. I don't believe we should demand it. Now, my reasoning is that I am a God-fearing, Christ-believing and worshiping and following Christian. This is who I am. That's why I reason that way. When I can't convince other people that they should have faith in Christ, when more people stop believing that and start believing that marriage ought to be this other thing than it is right now, broader than it is right now, in which case it will get broader and broader, and that's part of where society is going to go. I recognize all that goes with that. But in the meantime, my only prerogative for being able to preserve what I believe this institution of marriage should be is to encourage people to adopt my values. This is why I share Christ with them. Not just so those values be adopted, but so they'll know Christ. So I'm I don't want it to be a belligerent conflict of hate, and I hate the suffering and the persecution that goes along with this issue. It is inappropriate. It's not just inappropriate, it's disgusting. I mean, what we want to say is all the right-wing people who want to put all the homosexuals in a cage, all those right-wing people ought to be put in a cage. You know, we're good with that. Because it doesn't help my case for him to get up and say that. He's messing up the whole point. It is not a matter of hate or disdain or judgment. It is a matter of saying, I have values that won't allow me to sanction that relationship. The majority of people in our society have values that will not allow us to sanction that relationship. Don't make us sanction it. That's all we're saying. Allow us that freedom. Thanks.
All right. Now the moment you've been waiting for. If you want to ask a question, come on up again. Again, let's keep it restricted to questions and not comments. And it looks like there's a lot of people, so let's not do two-part questions. Let's do one part, say your question, and sit back down. But if you want to come back up and go right back in line, go ahead. So, with that being said, let's go for it.
All right. I just want to say I really appreciate your honesty. I don't see in a lot of Christian speakers that I see out in this same similar circuit doing things. So I applaud that. The issue that you have, I understand what you're saying about sanctioning. I could go there, but I'm not. But it all stems from your belief that the gay choice, as many Christians would call it, is wrong. And I guess my issue was that I would like to ask you about is, how do you approach the style of Christian cafeteria style, picking and choosing rules and laws from the New Testament, if we just go there, that being gay is wrong, or acting on being gay is wrong, such as, do you permit women to speak in church? Are they allowed to cut their hair? Do they have to wear a cover on their head?
Right.
Those are in the New Testament and clearly spoken of as being
right.
something that Paul said they shouldn't do.
Yeah, and funny how most of those are actually related, but because I am a complementarian, I do believe there's a difference between the roles of men and women in churches. That's it. Not for any quality reason, it just happens to be there. But with that said, hermeneutics, just basic interpretive principles, tells me if the scriptures say, greet one another with a holy kiss, it doesn't mean I have to kiss everyone. Because in other places, and this is how we read all of Scripture inductively, we read a lot of passages together to make sense of it. In other places it says greet the brothers, and it doesn't say you have to kiss them. So fortunately I get the handshake instead, things like that. So I'm saying the same thing with that. Some of those expressions are particular to that instance or that congregation or that moment, and some are universal. And the difference is, are they repeated, and are they made imperative repeatedly? And that's the question. And that one is. It's very clearly
It's not.
morally
It
presented.
has to do with interpretation of how you interpret that.
That one's not that difficult.
They're talking about
It is
male prostitution
morally
versus
stated.
homosexuality.
Okay,
Got a lot of discussion about that.
It was a good point and well made. I appreciate it.
Okay, if God gives little boys and little girls, brothers and sisters, and in one family you see two brothers, in another family you see two sisters, and in another family you see a boy and a girl, and sometimes you have a brother and a sister. When you grow up, I think God is also telling us that He gives us different life people to live with when we're young and when we're old. So if my childhood was with only a brother and not with a sister, I don't see why it's so prohibitive to choose to have an adulthood that's same sex, or that is bisexual, or that is lesbian. Now, if we identify that there is loneliness and hurt, etc., surrounding gay marriage, then if we see that, I think that maybe, would you agree that it's a little bit not throwing a life preserver to someone who's drowning? If we see all these social harms with the people who want gay marriage, isn't it a moral obligation? Isn't it being like a savior, being like Christ, to save someone who's hurting? Because the doctor said that, yes, I know the pain, the psychological harm that you brought up with the person who has to say, well, this is my roommate and this is not my husband, or this is, so if God gives us same-sex partners to live with as children, I think that same God, allows us to grow into adulthood and have same-sex partners, life partners.
Are you saying that you think God is okay with homosexuality and same-sex
Yeah, I
marriage?
think God sends us to this earth to live with two brothers or two sisters or a brother and sister. And if we don't sanction it, do you agree that there's something unchristlike and immoral about that?
I think that it's hypocritical to Scripture to say that God would condone a homosexual relationship when throughout the Bible he specifically dictates you are not allowed to do that, and not only, but goes a step further in the Old Testament and says to kill homosexuals, they should be stoned to death with stones so that their blood shall be upon them. And then in the New Testament it even says in Romans that, I think she turned everything on.
Okay. No, my mic's on. Here.
Nope, I'm on.
Well, people can't hear you, so there you go.
Hello.
That's better.
I think our batteries are dying. Mine's red.
Oh, okay. So yeah, I think that the Bible is very clear that it's against homosexuality. And even in the New Testament, it does mention, in a very verbose verse, that homosexuals ultimately, at the end of the verse, it says, are worthy of death. So it does not condone homosexuality at all. And I think Dr. Kramer would agree.
Well, of course, biblically, but I think in response to your statement, I would say that a sexual relationship is completely distinct from a non-sexual relationship, completely different item, and way more than we can possibly get into right now. But I would heartily suggest, if you want to see my viewpoint, and I hold his viewpoint entirely on this particular issue, Roger Scruton is a philosopher from Oxford, I think, maybe Cambridge. Roger Scruton, and he wrote a book called Sexual Desire that deals with this from a secular vantage point, philosophical vantage point, and basically his conclusion about why that particular type of relationship, a sexual relationship, is so distinct from a sibling relationship or anything else. So, yeah, thank you. It was a nice question.
Yeah, I was just wondering, how do you feel about people after they get a sex change or hermaphrodite? Should they be allowed to be married?
Yeah, well, hermaphroditism is a different issue than this question, but if you're talking about transgender people, is that right? Is that what you're asking?
Well, probably both. After the operation choice that they made, should they be allowed to?
Some people don't make a choice. I mean, hermaphroditism is
right. That was going to be the
feature of
second
nature.
part. That was going to be the second part.
That's why it says two parts. Yeah, I mean, two separate issues though. So if you're asking what should a transgender person do, my belief that we are created for a purpose dictates that I don't believe we should change our gender. I don't believe that's the right thing to do. Does that mean I think it has to be illegal or something like that? I'm not saying that. I don't know. I don't believe it's the right thing for them to have done. Does that mean they can't live the rest of their life? No. Does that mean it doesn't lead to confusing ethical issues when they're choosing a partner for the rest of their life? It will lead to confusing issues, but the transgender action, the surgical action, or whatever was chosen, is where the problem took place. From then on, the confusion is just a natural result of it.
So do you, to his point though, I'm glad you asked the question. I didn't think of that. If someone is born a male, it feels like a female throughout their, I like this mic because it's louder. If they feel like a female and they change their sex, are they then, in your eyes, do you think they should be able to get married to someone that holds their original sex prior to the operation?
Yeah, I mean, my answer to that question isn't going to change the fact that I believe that decision was wrong and leads to the difficulty of the circumstance. In which case, I don't know what the best answer is. I don't know. So let's say that person went through that procedure, and then you can make it more complicated for me and say they went through that procedure, and then they basically repented of it. They said, oh, I wish I hadn't done this, but it's too late. You know, here I am committed to it. What am I supposed to do now? And then they came into me and said, would you marry me? I don't know how to do this. Who am I supposed to marry? This person or that person? Which way does it go? I would say, I don't know. I don't know the answer. But the fact that there are moral difficulties doesn't change the fact that some things are right, some things are wrong.
The actual choice to go transgender, I think, should not have been made. That's where the...
And what about people that are born that way? His second part.
The hermaphroditism is another, I mean, that's why I said it's a much more difficult issue. It's just the
But I think it
reality
points to the issue
that
of-
some people are born. I'm assuming you take that as evidence that it is not the case that we are created for a purpose, that part of that purpose includes our gender. You're saying, well, it's just part of one of the evolutionary features. Some people are in between. I don't view it that way. I don't think the world is accidental. I do think there are things in the world that are a consequence of our current state, that we're not where we should be. And part of those consequences involve people. Some people are born in all kinds of conditions, with attitudes, with directions that are, whatever we think is right or wrong. Some people are born more belligerent, like us. Some people are born more passive. Yes.
This question is for you, Dr. Creamer. No, to start this off.
Now wait, aren't you supposed to be neutral? No, you're not sitting there anymore.
No, he's not a moderator. I'm just a guy.
Yeah.
I would like to start this off by saying that I actually am 19 and engaged. So...
Mistake.
Yeah, sure it was, Smalley, sure it was. That wasn't directed at me at all when you said that. But I am in a relationship, obviously, and it's a very loving relationship, a committed relationship. We love each other very deeply, and I'm not going to tell you their gender, that's key to this. We love each other, we live together, we struggle to pay the rent together, we have a child together from their previous relationship, and I want to spend the rest of my life with this person. Should I be allowed to get married to them? And should my relationship with them be recognized as a marriage, even if the majority of society may disagree with it for whatever reason that is? And I'll tell you, their gender has to be answered.
If you came to me as a pastor and asked me this question, I would say, well, you've already made some mistakes, so let's try to work on those mistakes and see if we can get you back into a better position for having a marriage that's in the right way. Living together, living together right now, I believe is a mistake. I believe the sexual relationship should be preserved for that extant lifelong commitment. That's it. So if you don't already have that, then I think the sexual relationship ahead of that compromises. It doesn't ruin, but it compromises.
How does sex compromise? Sorry.
Are we really going to go all the way down that road?
No. But just she is a woman.
Either way, I mean, I would tell you that either way, though.
Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
This is for both of you. I have a psychology teacher who we had a discussion, let's say 2 days ago, that said gender and sex is different. Gender is your social, the social acceptance, I guess, and sex is your chromosome. Now, I have a friend who I've had since first grade, and they were born as an XXY. No sex organs, nothing and she takes estrogen pills for her entire life so that she can be a gender. And my question to you is how do you feel that goes into marriage as hetero, gay, so forth?
Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know the particulars of her circumstance. I don't know the particulars of her circumstance nor the answer to that question. I will say, does she look at it and say, I'm so glad that I'm not XY or XX. I'm so glad I'm XXY. That's what makes me who I am. I don't know. I don't know what her attitude about that is, but my presumption is that she probably looks at it with a little frustration every once in a while. And that's all I would say about it. That, some people are born with different attitudes, different conditions, different states. Some of them are great, some of them are terrible, and everywhere in between, we just got to figure out how to live with it. And I don't know the answer to that question without dealing with her explicitly. Directly.
I'm so glad you asked that question, because it brings up the point the other gentleman was making about hermaphrodites and also transgender people choosing to change their biological sex because they don't feel like they belong to that specific gender. And that's my point, really, about this entire thing, is that it comes down to your socially accepted gender. It's about gender. It's not really about anything else. And for people that are like that, it becomes very confusing from his perspective. He has to keep saying, oh, I don't know how to handle that, I know exactly how to handle that. He, she, whoever the person is, regardless of what gender they feel like or sexual organs they have, should be allowed to marry any person they are in love with. Bottom line, it's easy for me to answer.
So I just want to be clear on two things. Number one is, you are much more comfortable saying, I know the answer, than I am, which is ironic, considering the viewpoints we're supposed to have and the tragic imposition of my religion on everyone I'm supposed to be putting. Secondly, this is the nature of relationships in our society is part of the object of this big discussion, right? Should same-sex marriage be legal? And these questions reveal the biggest divide between us on every topic. I believe that God creates, in fact, I can say it without God, I'm an essentialist. I believe that there is an essence, a nature, a purpose to the way we're supposed to be, and we either measure up to it or we don't, and it makes us very uncomfortable when we don't. Sometimes it's our fault, sometimes it's not our fault, but we don't measure up, and then we hate that, and we don't want to be told that. And your view is that there is no measure, there is no standard, there is no goal out there that we had to achieve in order to be approved, which is why I also look at us and say we're in need of a Redeemer, and you don't. So that's where the basic division is.
Yeah, my goal would be equality.
Well, your personal goal, but it's not necessarily a goal for anyone else. There's no moral reason for it. You just like it.
Hello. Thank you, Dr. Creamer and David Smalley, for being here this evening. I have two questions for you, David. The first goes back to one thing you said earlier. You were talking about same-sex marriage, and you referenced interracial marriage. And some people would say that it is like comparing apples and oranges. And I know Dr. Creamer touched on this a little bit, where when you're talking about same-sex marriage and interracial marriage, it's like, I know you appreciate science, so if you want to say the science behind race, and you want to say, well, is being black genetic, is being white genetic, I mean, you can look to the science behind that, but my question is, wouldn't you say that the science behind being gay is less clear than the science behind being black, for instance?
As far as genetically?
Yeah, because you compared interracial marriage with same-sex marriage.
Valid point, yes. There are studies that are conflicting.
Right.
The studies that seem to make the most sense share that being gay is biological. But I really don't even want to go down that road of comparing the genetics of a race to genetics of sexual orientation. But honestly, they're both genetic. I don't know very many people that would argue with that didn't have a Christian viewpoint.
Well, what do you mean by both genetic? And just to follow up, like,
well, someone's race, someone's eye color, it's all genetic. The size of someone's hands or fingers, it's all genetic. It's biological. Just like this gentleman asked the question about the specific chromosomes in the XXY, it's genetic. A person's sexuality or reproductive organs, it's all genetic. Everything ultimately begins with biology. That's what I'm saying.
Well,
that's pretty presumptuous. I mean, the idea that the psychological condition of desire would be equivalently genetic inherently somehow to the color of my eyes is just silly. And you know that. You know your psychology develops in more ways than just by genetics. You know genetic determinism is not established for psychology.
Right, and my point is that being gay is not a psychological decision. It's a biological...
No, I didn't say decision. It is a psychological state. It is a mental state. I desire this, not that. That's a psychological state. So is it entirely genetic or not? You can't say based on the fact that my eye color is a certain thing. It's just not the same thing.
Honestly, I wouldn't touch the question.
Okay. And
Ray is talking with you on that one.
Let him ask his question. You can go to your second one.
Thank you.
Hey, I just wanted a clarification from David Smalley of why he
that hasn't come to a position yet on polygamy. And I only
Don't do that to me.
Well, I only ask because I'm a gay person and I'm polyamory, and my end goal is to get married to multiple men. So.
Well, thanks. Well, these are the kind of things you don't want to happen in a gay marriage. No,
I feel the strangest kinship.
You connected with the gay atheist. That is awesome. Well, no, I guess because of many of the people that enter, and I thought I clarified this, many of the people, and let's call it traditional polygamy, and what I mean by that is the religious implications of one man saying he is allowed to have multiple wives, yet the wives are not allowed to have multiple husbands.
What you oppose is the subjugation of women.
Ultimately, yes, what I'm right.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Since there's a new person right behind you. Okay.
Sorry, I'll try to be brief. My follow-up question for you, David Smalley, is in terms of like the body of research that's out there right now about the effects of fatherlessness on children, like just what happens to kids that don't have fathers, and sometimes there's those negative outcomes. Would you say that that could be a weakness of same-sex marriage? Because by definition, there's only one gender represented, and if we already have this research out there that says, you know, boys need fathers, girls need their fathers. Like, so what do you say to that body of research?
I think it's an oversimplification. I think that single parents are absolutely amazing and do wonderful jobs. I'm the product of a single parent myself. My father wasn't around very much, and my mother had to sort of play both roles. And I don't know that I would agree with all of that research. I don't think that the research would be necessarily that effective. And I'm sure that we could disagree on that. I'm sure the Family Research Council has data to prove me wrong, yet there are multiple studies out there that would disagree. So no, I don't even agree that single-parent homes are bad for children. Because I can tell you, I know my father now, and I don't know that things would have been great if they would have stayed married. So I'm glad I'm very happy for the way I was raised with my mother and my mother alone. So having one gender represented, I mean, I'm still in society. I still went to daycares. I still went to schools. You know, there are cousins. There are you know, I mean, it's way more than just you're only exposed to one gender for a large portion of your development. It's really not that cut and dry. So I don't think that's the big of a problem at all.
So a large part of the discussion about whether the government should recognize gay marriage is the effect it's going to have on society. And my question is just to each of you, what are your thoughts on what the result will be to society if we take the opposite route and equalize, you know, gay marriage and polygamy to the same status as heterosexual marriage by government, not recognizing any marriages and it being a solely private institution?
Yeah, I mean, it's already 9 o'clock, so my answer is I hate to do this to you, but my answer would be 30 minutes long, and I do teach this pretty regularly, but it would be to point you to Roger Scruton's book. It's not an exciting read, it's a great philosophical read, and it does make my point. So I do believe that some of it's attached to what you were saying, but on the opposite end. I think there's a strength in the heterosexual relationship being the sexual relationship that a couple, but it does. I agree with you. I mean, we're not in agreement, but I'm in agreement that all the violations of marriage are equally threatening to that institution. So not only does it have to be monogamous and heterosexual, it has to be lifelong. Every impingement on that, I view negatively.
And just to clarify, you're saying the implications of the society if we rolled back the opposite direction? Instead of allowing more people to get married?
Well, you would essentially, rather than the government recognizing, say, a gay couple for tax purposes, they wouldn't recognize anybody as a married couple. It would be solely a private institution. There's no such thing as...
It would no
there would be no such thing as a marriage license that you go and get from the government. It would be solely a private institution.
My point would be that would no longer be marriage. It would just wouldn't exist. There you go, sir.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for attending this marathon of reason, I suppose. A huge thing you should go to our gracious hosts, Collin College, and their media staff and their administration. They've been awesome.